Dating the Actor. Written by Cindy Ray Hale. Chapter 1. Your card was declined. Do you have another way to pay for this? I'm sorry. I forced a polite smile. That can't be right. Can you please give it another try? The pierced-up guy swiped my card again with an arm covered in so many tattoos I could barely find a patch of clear skin. Sorry. Still declined. He tapped the card against the counter impatiently. Head bent over my wallet, I tucked back long, wavy strands of red hair that kept falling into my line of vision, digging for any stray bills that could be hiding behind my stack of receipts. Nothing. Not a single dollar. An arm covered in a black leather jacket reached out and slapped a 20 onto the counter. This should cover it, right? Relief flooded through me. Thank you so much. I spun around to see who had rescued me. The guy was totally hot. Messy brown hair, piercing blue eyes, and a devil-may-care grin. You are so awesome for helping out. Some of us have places to go, he said, smacking his gum. The good feeling diminished. I scowled at him. The tattooed clerk gave him his change. I took my food and rushed outside. I held back a curse when my keys jammed in the door. I jerked the door open. I climbed inside, took a long sip of my smoothie, and sighed in bliss. Kale Me Crazy was hands down my favorite juice bar. I pulled up an email on my phone and tapped the link to the address listed there. I set my GPS on its course and pulled out from the terrible parallel parking job I'd done. The GPS led me to a warehouse the studio had rented out. A bright yellow sign labeled Audition Parking directed me to a parking lot across the street. After I parked, I walked for about 5 minutes. Before opening the door with the sign labeled Auditions, I smoothed down my hair. Hi, I'm here to audition, I said, out of breath. Name? A guy asked in a denim shirt. Aleyna McKenzie. Fill this out and take a seat, the denim shirt guy said in a monotone voice, handing me a sheet of paper. My hands shook as I filled out the information. A few minutes later, they called my name, and I scuttled into the room. The director, a bald guy with a stud in one ear, stared down at my headshot and resume as I delivered my monologue. Without even looking up, the director said in a brusque tone, "Thank you for coming." I forced a smile and backed out of the room, holding back tears. As I walked back to my car, I pulled out my phone. Hey, Mom. Hey. How are you? I've been better. My audition didn't go well. If I'd landed this commercial, it would have paid $1,000, money I desperately needed. For the past year, I'd been searching for real acting work. I'd made ends meet by picking up extras gigs here and there. Surprisingly enough, Atlanta provided enough background work to help me pay my meager bills. But my little red Corolla was on its way out, and who knew how much further my small sporadic paychecks would keep me covered. What went wrong? She asked. I don't know. I guess I wasn't feeling it. And I was late. I'm sure that didn't help. Maybe it's time to start getting serious about your future. You could come home and go to the community college here in North Carolina. Mom, it was just a bad audition. I'll get more auditions, and eventually, I'll get cast in something and everything will be fine. I didn't believe myself as I said it. I wanted to, but deep down, the doubt swirled in my belly. Maybe I should have just gone straight to California. But Zoe, my best friend since I was 5, convinced me to come live with her in Atlanta. She said it was the Hollywood of the South. It was true. Atlanta did offer a lot of auditions, but it still wasn't anything like being in California. I drove home. When I got to the house, I parked beside Zoe's Jetta and jerked open the mailbox. I grabbed the pile of envelopes and sorted through it, grateful when I found a paycheck nestled between two pieces of junk mail. I ripped open the side tabs and opened the paper, peering at the amount. $82.94. It wasn't much, but it was better than the $1.82 I was sitting on in my bank account. I swung open the front door and saw Zoe sitting in the middle of the floor with a drop cloth spread around her, painting an end table a sunny yellow. I reached up to my cat key rack and hung my keys on the black cat's tail that curved into the hook. "Whatcha up to?" I asked. Zoe dipped her paintbrush into a can of chalk paint. She loved the stuff because she could pick up old furniture from yard sales and paint right over them without sanding or stripping the varnish. The two-bedroom house her dad bought when she got into Emory University's pre-med program was full of her various projects. The kitchen table was bright red with yellow chairs and seat cushions recovered in red and yellow polka-dotted fabric. Shelves repainted in various chalk paint colors hung on the walls. She painted everything with the stuff. Light fixtures, doorknobs, cabinet poles, vases, picture frames. Leaning against the kitchen counter, I ripped out the check, signed it, and snapped a photo of it with the bank app installed on my phone. I opened the fridge and pulled out a bundle of kale. I laid out a cutting board and pulled my favorite knife from the wooden block I kept on the counter next to the fridge. I glanced out the window. Oscar, Zoe's boxer, was chasing a squirrel in our muddy backyard. I grinned. He would be such a mess when we brought him in later tonight. After chopping my kale, I dumped it in the salad spinner and spun the excess water from it. I opened the fridge. Ooh, we have leftover couscous from last night. Zoe had recently introduced me to this Mediterranean restaurant, and we'd become obsessed with it. Zoe's dad was a film executive in Atlanta. Her parents split when she was 13, and he'd been distant until lately. When she got into Emory, he reappeared into her life, paid her tuition, and bought her the house. I thought it was a little strange that he didn't just have her move in with him, but Zoe suspected that it was because he didn't want to have to explain the lifestyle he'd chosen since he became a film executive. She still held a lot of resentment toward him, but I knew she was grateful for his help. Emory's tuition was insanely expensive. Later that night, Zoe browsed through YouTube on the big TV her dad had hooked us up with, checking out her favorite indie bands. "I just found this amazing new band," she said, clicking to the next video on her playlist. "They play folk music, but they have a unique sound, almost like rock, but not." "Sounds cool," I said, propping my computer on my lap and leaning back into a pile of the Disney pillows I'd collected. Zoe twirled a tight curl around her finger with a guilty look on her face. "I should get back to doing homework. I've been slacking big time tonight." She released the curl, and it sprung into place with the rest of her dark hair. "You? Slacking?" Just because she took a break to paint her end table and watch a couple of YouTube videos, she was going to beat herself up about it. Zoe was so obsessed with school, she signed up for summer classes so she could finish her undergraduate work faster. She grabbed her backpack and opened a thick textbook. "I swear I should have bought this on ebook. I can't believe I lugged this cinder block around campus. How are you and Wyatt doing?" I asked, opening my Gmail. She'd started dating this new guy about a week ago, and she'd been falling hard for him. But I had yet to meet him. "Amazing. He's taking me hiking up Stone Mountain this weekend. Sounds fun." I clicked open an email and scanned the contents. "This audition looks promising. They're looking for a lead for a horror film. It's an indie film, but you gotta start somewhere, right?" I responded with my resume and headshot and filled out the information they asked for specifically. I scrolled through the rest of my emails. I clicked one open from a company called CL Casting. They were looking for ultra-thin refugees with messy hair to cast as extras in a post-apocalyptic series called Devastation. Where'd my phone go? I asked, looking around. It's on the coffee table, right in front of you, Zoe said. I need a picture of me with messy hair. Zoe snorted. That shouldn't be too hard. I tossed a Little Mermaid pillow at her. Why do you need a picture of you with messy hair? Are you updating your Tinder again? You know some guys are into that, right? I rolled my eyes. I'm submitting as background for a post-apocalyptic TV series. What about that blackmail picture I took of you from a few months ago? The one when I just woke up? I asked, scrolling through my phone to find it. Here it is. I stared back at my face and shuddered. I finished submitting and snapped my laptop shut. Do we have any ice cream? I'm starving. I think there's some of that dairy-free coconut stuff left, Zoe called over her shoulder as I danced my way into the kitchen. I dished out the rest of the chocolate frozen treat and settled into a yellow chair at the kitchen table. Tell me more about Wyatt. What's he do? How'd you meet him? I met him on campus during finals week at the testing center. He's a law student at Emory. Ooh, nice. He sounds like your type. Got a picture? Not yet. I'll have to get one this weekend. My phone pinged, and my heart raced. Had I heard back already from the indie film looking for auditions? I gulped down the last bite of ice cream and put my bowl in the sink, cringing at the pile of dishes there. I sunk back onto my pile of Disney pillows and checked my phone. My heart sunk a little. The email was from CL Casting. They had already seen my messy hair picture and were offering me the job as a refugee on Devastation. Looks like they want me to come in as an extra tomorrow morning, I said. Already? Zoe said. I shrugged. It was a last-minute thing. Happens all the time. Too bad it wasn't the indie film, Zoe said. Being an extra on Devastation isn't my ideal job, but at least it's some type of income, I said. Keep moving forward, girl. You'll get there one day, Zoe said. Why was it that at this moment she had more conviction in her voice than I felt? Chapter 2. I pulled my car into a muddy field filled with rows of cars. Tall, skinny pines stood silhouetted against the dark sky. The headlights of the shuttle bus turned the corner, momentarily blinding me. I climbed aboard and settled into a seat, dozing off until the bus filled with extras and the bus lurched forward. 5 minutes later, the shuttle turned a corner, and a cluster of tents, trailers, and food trucks stood before us. I followed the crowd of extras from the bus to a large tent where we were being checked off a list by the extras casting agency. Aleyna, good to see you again, Melanie said with a smile. I'd worked with her many times over the past year on various films. She usually cast me quickly because she knew I always arrived early, followed directions, and didn't cause trouble. In the world of background acting, so many people no-showed or caused trouble for the directors. When extras cost the director time, it tended to get expensive fast. This is a no cell phone set today. I handed over my phone. Melanie dropped it into a brown paper bag with my name on it and added it to the bin with the rest. I'd been on sets where extras had been asked to leave and then blacklisted from returning to the project because they were caught making videos or taking pictures on set. There was a market for extras who landed background work just to feed insider photos to the paparazzi. I walked over to the breakfast table and wrinkled my nose at the choices. Pancakes and scrambled eggs that looked dried out. Aren't you a sight for sore eyes? I turned to see creepy Craig leering at me. He was one of the production assistants I'd worked with way too much over the last year in various productions. The dude was like 40 and was known for hitting on younger girls. I was surprised he kept getting work as a PA after all the sexual harassment cases filed against him, but somehow, he kept showing up on the next set. He leaned in too close, and his breath smelled like rotting garbage. I'm taking a group to the wardrobe tent right now, just to give you a heads up, if you want to get in the front of the line. Did he think that was supposed to get me to warm up to him or something? The guy was delusional. I turned my face away from his disgusting breath and took 2 steps away from him, but still waited nearby as he announced to the crowded tent that he was taking another group to wardrobe. Inside the wardrobe tent, I told the lady at the folding table my name, and she said, "Oh, you just got added to the list last night." She stood up. "Come this way." She led me to an area with racks and racks of clothing. "Most everyone else has already been outfitted, so we're going to have to see what we can come up with for you since you're so last minute." She grabbed a brown tank top, khaki cargo pants, and a military green canvas jacket. "Go try these on, and we'll see if they work," she said, directing me to the girls' changing area. I did as she said, and with her approval, I moved on to hair and makeup. Despite my effort to arrive a bit early and to skip breakfast, the line for hair and makeup was already forming. Rob, another extra I'd worked with many times before, saw me from his spot in line and inclined his head in acknowledgement. I chatted idly with a few people in line and then climbed the steps of the makeup trailer. The makeup artist was a large, older black woman with a kind face. "Have a seat, love," she said. She pulled out a makeup wipe and cleaned off the makeup I'd already put on that morning. "They should have told you not to wear anything today." "Sorry about that." "It wasn't in the email," I said. She had me wipe off my mascara as she pulled out brown powder and began dusting it all over my face. She smeared brown cream down my arms in streaks and rubbed black into my fingernails. I relaxed in the chair as she worked on me and almost dozed off until she patted my knee. "You're good to go." I hopped out of the makeup chair and went outside to join the line for hair. Luckily, this line was much shorter. The stylist inspected my hair, which I'd slept on wet the night before to allow my natural curl to do its thing. She took a comb and frizzed out my already messy mane. She braided a small section of my hair and let it nestle among my frizzed-out waves. I stopped by one last area where a guy with a duster powdered down my clothes with fake dirt. Although I knew it was only makeup, I still felt like I was covered with filth. I walked back to the large tent where extras holding was located and sat at a table where a group of guys were way too into a game of cards. Someone laid down a hand, and the entire table erupted into chaos. The PAs showed up and took a group to the set, but I wasn't chosen. Rob walked out with the first group with a smug look on his face. Somehow that guy always managed to get the most time in front of the camera. It was like he thought that his time in front of the screen would equal real acting experience. I was only there to network and to get some extra money. It was amazing how many people I'd been able to meet during my time of doing extras work. A girl with long blonde hair took a seat next to me and set down a plate of pancakes. How she ate that many carbs and stayed that skinny was beyond me. "Hey," she said. "Danielle." I squealed. "How are you?" I hadn't seen her in a few months. I knew she'd landed some non-union smaller speaking roles lately. "Not bad," she said. "Been busy putting together an independent project I'm working on with a few other people I met on set." "That's awesome." She shoved her food around on her plate. "So, I heard some girls saying they'd seen Carson Peters on set today." "Who's that?" I asked. "You don't know who Carson Peters is?" "He's been in all kinds of stuff." "Like what?" I asked. Although I did plenty of background work, I didn't really follow celebrity gossip. If I had my phone, I'd pull up his IMDb. She leaned in conspiratorially. You'll know when you see him. He's easily the hottest guy on set." She leaned back in her chair with a dreamy smile. "Make that all of Atlanta." Hours passed, and as the day progressed, the Atlanta heat picked up. I stripped down to my tank top and began fanning myself with a paper plate. Danielle left with another group of extras, but they still never called me out to set. I pulled out the folded-up paper I'd thrown into my purse with the monologue I was memorizing for the audition I'd submitted for last night. An hour later, a big crowd of extras with faces flushed from the heat scattered to their seats among the folding tables and metal chairs. Creepy Craig called for lunch, and a line began forming at the tables laden with food. I'd been so absorbed with my monologue I hadn't even noticed the caterers bringing in our lunch. While I was filling my plate with salad, the guy behind me in line offered me a roll from the tongs he was holding. I shook my head. "No, thanks. She doesn't want bread, but does she want a date?" He said it with what was probably supposed to be his most charming smile. Once again, no thanks. I don't date guys from set. I gave him a sweet smile. It's my personal rule. "Oh, come on, baby. Can't you make an exception for me?" "I don't make exceptions." I made a face like I'd just eaten bad guacamole. "And don't call me that." I was grateful when I got to the dessert table, and I could go back to my seat. The guy got the message and didn't follow me. Danielle was already sitting next to my spot, eating her lunch. I'd been sure to stay hydrated all day, and it was starting to get to me. "Do you know where the bathrooms are?" I asked Danielle after we tossed our lunch trash. "I don't," she said. "I'll go ask Melanie where it is." "Wait up. I need to go, too," Danielle said. Melanie smiled when we approached with our question. "Take a left out of the tent, pass hair and makeup, go down 3 more trailers, turn right, and it's over by some tents." I scrunched my brow as I tried to map it out in my mind. Okay. I think I got it. We passed hair and makeup and couldn't remember where to turn next. After a few trailers, we turned, but I couldn't see the bathrooms anywhere. Looking for something, I spun around. It was the guy from Hale Me Crazy, looking just as hot as I'd remembered. Yeah. The bathrooms." He cocked his head to the side. "I know you. You're that redhead from Hale Me Crazy." "Yeah. Thanks for helping out, by the way." His mouth pulled up into a half smile, and like he hadn't heard me, he said, "Well, don't you dirty up nice." I glared at him. Seriously? I was so sick of guys trying to pick me up on set. "Bathrooms are that way," he said, pointing to my right. "Thanks," I mumbled. When we turned the corner, Danielle's eyes were huge. "What is it?" I asked. "I thought you said you didn't know who Carson Peters was." "I don't." "Aleyna. That was Carson Peters." "Oh." I shrugged. It wasn't the first time I'd bumped into someone uber famous on set. It came with the job description. "How do you know him?" she asked, still incredulous. "I don't really. He was just behind me in line yesterday." I left out the part where he paid for my smoothie. Danielle didn't need to know how broke I was. "Be careful with him," she said as we approached the trailer with the bathrooms. "He has a reputation." I climbed the stairs. "What's that supposed to mean?" I asked, pausing before opening the door. She climbed the steps to the bathroom door next to mine and then leaned over the railing toward me and whispered, "He's a player." I almost laughed out loud. She thought I'd get involved with him. About an hour after lunch, I was called to go to set. I followed Craig as he led the crowd of extras to a wooded area with tents surrounding a campfire and a makeshift barricade. A cook pot was set up over the fire, and a woman dressed like me stirred whatever seemed to be inside. Another PA directed me to hang out with Danielle and a dark-haired girl I didn't recognize in a nearby tent. A tall, good-looking guy stood in front of the camera with a girl with long, fiery red hair. After about 5 minutes of standing while the crew members positioned their cameras, the guy and the girl left, and Carson showed up with another redhead, dressed in the exact outfits as their stand-ins. "Who are they?" the dark-haired girl asked. She beamed. "I'm Gabby, by the way. Nice to meet you. I'm Aleyna. First time on set?" I asked. She nodded. "Those are the stand-ins. It's expensive to pay the lead actors to stand while they get the camera angles just right, so they hire people the same height and weight to stand in for them and pay them much less. I haven't done it myself, but I hear it's a pretty decent gig," I explained. "You at least get to eat from crew crafty, and you get to hang out with the crew more. Being an extra is tough because they tend to herd us around like mindless cattle." "What's crew crafty?" she asked. "It's short for craft services," Danielle explained, tucking a long lock of blonde hair behind her ear. "That's just what they call the snack table for the crew members. But their food is usually much better than the fruit snacks and goldfish they give the extras. But if you're super lucky like Danielle, you can get Craig to hook you up with food from Crew Crafty." "You," Danielle said. "That's not even a little bit funny. That day was so horrible. I finally had to get Rob to pretend to be my boyfriend to get Craig off my back." The female PA came over to us. "Okay, I want you guys to hang out in the tent and pantomime to each other, which means no talking. Just move your mouths like you're talking to each other. Try to make it as natural looking as possible." She pulled out a stapled bundle of half sheets of papers that she kept rolled up in her back pocket and flipped through it. "Another group of rebels is going to attack, and I want you guys to cower in your tent and huddle together like you're scared for your lives." "Got it." She rolled the bundle of papers back up and shoved them back into her pocket. "Got it," I said, masking my annoyance. All this sitting, and I probably wouldn't even be on camera. The camera was on the other side of the camp, and if I were lucky, I'd only be a blur on the edge of the frame. Not that it mattered, but sometimes it was fun to see myself in productions. Carson and the red-headed girl ran some dialogue, and then the director called out, "Rolling." We began our pantomiming, and when the group of rebels attacked from the woods, we huddled together, acting like we were scared out of our minds. We repeated the scene about 5 more times before moving on. The PA chick came back over to us. "I need you guys to hang tight over here for a while. They're turning the cameras around, and it'll just be a few minutes. I'll let you know when we're up and running again." We settled in on the cots in our tent. Another PA came around with a bucket full of water bottles, and we each took one greedily. The heat was scorching. Rob came over to us. "You guys are totally on camera," he said, sarcasm dripping from his voice. "Shut up, Rob," Danielle said. We got back to filming, and after another 2 hours of shooting, the female PA came up to us. "We're officially wrapped for the day, but we're looking for a few extras to come back tomorrow. Would any of you be available to return?" "Count me in," said Danielle. "Me too," said Gabby. "I can do it as well," I said. Despite the heat, the boredom of sitting in extras holding all day, and not even being on camera, every day that I could show up for another day of work was money contributing to my bank account. These days, every penny counted. Chapter 3. When I got changed back into my regular clothes, I went back to the casting table to turn in my paperwork from the day so that I could get paid. They also returned my phone to me. I checked my phone notifications and saw that I had an email from the casting company for the audition I submitted for last night. They wanted me to come in. Yes. I breathed. Good news? Danielle asked. I almost jumped. I hadn't noticed her sneak up beside me. Yes. I submitted for a lead in an indie film last night, and they want me to come in and audition this Monday at 11. That's awesome. Before you know it, you'll have your own dressing room. I don't know about all that, I said with a smile. That night at home, I pored over the monologue. Hey, I need a serious study break. You want to go hit up the health food store for snacks? Zoe asked. Can you film me doing my monologue for 5 minutes before we go? I asked. Sure, Zoe said. She pulled out her camera and I performed the monologue I'd pulled from a teen horror movie. When I finished, she lowered her phone. How'd I do? I asked. You need to loosen up, she said. You look way stiff. I groaned. You're overthinking it. Just keep practicing. The more time you spend in front of the camera, the better you will do. You just need to get used to it. The next morning, when I got on set, they had me skip the initial paperwork part, but they still made me turn in my phone. The wardrobe crew had me change into the same outfit I'd had on yesterday. Creepy Craig took us straight to set right after breakfast, and I was glad I had my jacket since there was a slight chill in the early morning air. A PA put me with Danielle and Gabby around the cook fire and had Rob standing nearby with a fake rifle, looking menacing. Soon after we were in our places, the director positioned Carson stand-in about 5 feet away as the camera began focusing on him. The PA from yesterday approached me. Have you ever been a stand-in before? She asked. No, I said. How tall are you? I'm 5'5". She nodded. That's perfect. Our stand-in didn't show up today, and we're in a huge bind. Would you be willing to take her place today? Sure. No problem. I said. So much for being in front of the camera like I thought. Stand-ins didn't get any screen time at all. She pulled me to an X on the ground just in front of Carson's stand-in. When the cameras were in position, they led me away from the set as the red-headed lead actress, who I later learned was named Cheyenne, and Carson walked toward the cameras. As I walked past Carson, he grinned broadly at me. Back again, huh? His stand-in hit Carson lightly on the arm with the back of his hand. Rochelle no-showed today. She's standing in for her. Literally, huh? Carson said with a grin. Carson went to the set, and his stand-in turned to me. Hey, there. I'm Wyatt. I'll show you where we hang out. He led me to a tent with a few chairs set up. You get to take over Rochelle's chair today. He pointed to a metal folding chair with a paper taped to the back that had Rochelle's name on it. We sat in the chairs, and I felt antsy. I didn't have my phone, and I'd left all my stuff back at Extras Holding. A PA with shaggy hair and a Braves hat crammed over his messy blonde waves came up to us. Are you Aleyna? He asked. Yes. I'm supposed to take you back to Extras Holding so you can get your stuff and move it over here. Thanks, I said. He smiled as we walked back to the Extras Holding tent. I'm Xavier, he said. After we get your stuff, we'll need to take you to wardrobe again so you can get on the right clothes. I nodded. Later today, you'll be approached by someone from your casting company who will help you fill out some paperwork to switch you from being an extra to a stand-in. You will be getting both paychecks today, lucky for you. I felt another financial burden lift from my shoulders as he said the words. We walked into the tent, and I scooped up my belongings. He led me back to the stand-in tent and held his hand up to his ear as someone spoke over his earpiece. He turned to me. You'll need to hang out here for a minute because I think they're going to need you back on set. We'll have to get you to wardrobe during your lunch break. He grabbed his earpiece again. Okay. Let's head back to set now. I followed Xavier to the set. The director had me standing in a slightly different position in the same camp. This time, we were over by the tents where I'd been pantomiming yesterday. Wyatt and I hung out for about 15 minutes, and then they released us back to sit in our chairs while they filmed Carson and Cheyenne. It was strange to only be there for the setup and then gone before the action started. They didn't call us back again until lunchtime, but at least I had plenty of time to work on my monologue. Wyatt didn't say much. He was absorbed in a thick book that looked extremely boring. He was as good-looking as Carson but didn't have nearly as much to say. Xavier appeared in our tent. Hey guys, we're going to break for lunch. Aleyna, you get the privilege of eating with the crew today. No more extras food. He led me to a tent where tables and chairs were set up like extras holding, but it was filled with crew and cast members. The food looked delicious. They were serving steak, lobster, fish, potatoes, kale salad, red beans, and rice. A beverage station was set up with a myriad of drinks, ranging from exotic teas and coffees to juices and soft drinks. I got in line and loaded up my plate with salad, beans, and rice. I grabbed pomegranate juice and stood at the end of the line and searched the tent, trying to decide where to sit. You look like a lost puppy. Wyatt, should we have mercy on her and let her sit with us? Carson asked, with a grin. I'm fine, I insisted. Come on, sweet pea, Carson said. We don't bite. At least not too hard. A grin cracked on my face. And she smiles, he said. I followed them to their table and sat next to Carson. He picked up his fork and began eating. My eyes slid over to his tray. It was an exact replica of mine. Everything I had on my tray, he had on his, down to the pomegranate juice. Are you a vegetarian? He asked. So he had noticed, too. No. I have celiac, and I got pretty used to shopping at the health food store. I eat meat, but not that often. I don't really like it. I looked over at him, wondering why he'd asked me. Are you a vegetarian? You caught me, he said with what I was beginning to recognize as his trademark smile. Was that smile the reason he'd landed so many big roles? First time being a stand-in? Carson asked. Is it that obvious? I asked. Well, I didn't want to say anything, but when my eyes grew huge, he started laughing. I'm only kidding. You did just fine. Xavier told me you were a first-timer. But I hear that Rochelle landed a role in an NBC series that's starting up, and she bailed on the project without warning. That's just bad business, Wyatt said, digging into his steak. You can't treat people like that in this industry if you want to get work, Carson said. If you haven't noticed, these people have all worked together before, and once you get a reputation, it tends to stick. It's all who you know. How long have you been a stand-in, Wyatt? I asked. Just for a few weeks, he said. I'm still pretty new to this arena. So, what are they going to do about Rochelle? Well, sweet pea, I'm guessing they're going to ask you to stay on for a few days until they find someone permanent. How often would they want me to come in? This is a full-time gig. Cheyenne pretty much works 5 days a week, all day. She's the female lead. Most days you'll put in overtime. It's up to you, but this kind of stand-in work can open a lot of doors for you in the industry. It's nothing to pass over easily, Carson said. His words stayed in my head for the rest of the meal. Long after the extras had wrapped for the day, I stayed while Carson and Cheyenne filmed scene after scene in the woods and later talking inside a tent as their characters made plans. When we'd finally wrapped for the day, it was starting to get dark. Xavier approached me as I walked with Wyatt back to our resting area. "Aleyna, the director would like to offer you an invitation to stay on the show for the next few days as Cheyenne's stand-in." I nodded. "I'll do it," I said. "Great," Xavier said. "Tomorrow's call time will be 9 a.m. at the studio in Decatur. CL Casting will be contacting you with more information via email tonight. Do you have any questions?" "Nope. No questions," I said. At least nothing that I wanted to voice to him. The questions swirling through my mind were private. Would I ever land a role to speak in front of the camera, or would I always be doomed to be an extra or a stand-in? Chapter 4. That night, I fell into bed completely exhausted. I set my alarm and fell asleep earlier than I had in weeks. The next morning, I stopped by Hale Me Crazy for a smoothie. I walked from the juice bar and out to my usual parking spot on the side of the road. I got inside my car and put my drink in my car's cup holder. I jammed my key into the ignition and turned it. Nothing happened. I turned my keys again and still nothing. Seriously? This can't be happening. I pulled out my phone and called Zoe. Hopefully, she could give me a ride to set. 3 taps sounded on the window next to my head, and I jumped so hard my phone fell from my hands, down between my feet. I yelped. I reached down to grab my phone from the floor and grabbed it just as Zoe picked up. I jerked the phone to my ear and banged my head on the steering wheel. The tapping on my car door sounded again, and I turned my head, rubbing the tender spot on the back of my head. Ow! I lowered my phone with my mouth hanging open. "Carson." I pushed the button to roll my window down, but it didn't respond. I opened the door instead. "Having some car trouble?" he asked. "Not at all." I smiled. "You sure about that?" he asked with a smug grin. I exhaled loudly. "No." "Aleyna. Is everything okay? Who are you talking to?" Zoe's voice sounded distant from my phone, and I realized I had lowered it from my ear when I discovered Carson. I quickly pulled the phone back to my ear. "Zoe?" I looked at Carson and lowered the phone as I asked him, "Can you hang on for just a second?" I held the phone back up to my face. "Zoe, I need a ride. My car just broke down in front of Hale Me Crazy, and I have to get to set." Carson snatched the phone from my hands before I could say another word. "We're actually going to the same place, so she's riding with me." My mouth dropped open. How dare he decide for me? I reached for my phone, but he stepped away. "No, no. It's no problem at all. We work together." "Sure thing." He hung up and handed the phone back to me with a triumphant smile. Problem solved. He jerked his head toward the street. "Let's get going. We wouldn't want you late for your new job, now would we?" "You really don't have to do this," I said. My friend Dash was on her way to an early morning study group and appreciated my help. I shut my mouth. I was out of excuses. "Thank you. I appreciate it, too." There. That wasn't so hard to say, was it?" he said, his eyes twinkling. "You got everything." I grabbed my smoothie and swung my bag over my shoulder, locking the door behind me. Carson strode forward and pulled out his phone. "James, I need a car towed to the mechanic in Decatur with the best reviews." He peered at my car. It's a red Toyota Corolla parked just outside of Hale Me Crazy. I wanted to tell him I could take care of my own car issues, but he continued like I wasn't there. He pocketed his phone as we approached a sporty, blue BMW. "You didn't have to do that," I said. He opened my car door for me, and I stepped inside, breathing in the smell of new leather. He walked to his side, climbed in, and put on a pair of aviators that looked like they cost more than the blue book value of my Corolla. I exhaled and then bit my lip. He froze, looking past me with an irritated look on his face. "What?" I asked, twisting around to see what he was looking at. Sitting at one of the tables, at Hale McKenzie, a person sat with a camera pointed at us. My mouth formed a silent, "Oh." "Paparazzi." He clicked on his seatbelt, strangely quiet as his engine roared to life. He sped down the street, toward the set, which thankfully was only 10 minutes away. "So, I started. Do you go to Hale McKenzie a lot?" Carson stared at the road and then said, "Define a lot." "Like once a week." He smiled. "I go probably 3 or 4 times a week." He slowed to a stop at a red light. "Really?" I asked, looking from the window to face him. So that was how the paparazzi knew to find him there. What would it be like to have people following you everywhere, tracking your personal life? Really, he said. You go a lot, too. I probably go about the same as you. Or I would if I had the cash. It's not exactly like extras work pays much, I said. So, what's your goal? Are you more interested in work in front of the camera or behind it? Carson asked. In front of the camera, I said without hesitation. It's been my dream for as long as I can remember. When I was 5, my mom threw me a movie star birthday party with a red carpet and a photographer and everything. By the time I was 6, I was writing and starring in my own theater productions. What about you? I asked. Have you always wanted to act? He shook his head. I went to college for political science, but I realized pretty quickly that it wasn't for me. The acting thing just kind of fell into my lap. My uncle is a Hollywood producer, and when big-time film companies started moving their productions to Atlanta because of the tax breaks, he moved here, too, and recommended me to the director he was working with for a small speaking role. I'd never done anything like it before, but I thought I'd give it a shot for fun. It turns out that I have a knack for it. The light turned green, and he hit the gas, causing his car to lurch forward with powerful speed, slamming me back into the seat. I clenched the armrest, and he chuckled. Too much for you, sweet pea. I'm fine, I grumbled. Why did he keep calling me that? Does that happen a lot? I asked. What? Paparazzi, I said. He shrugged. Some. It's just part of the job. When we got to the set, Carson parked close to the studio, in a special lot, guarded closely by security. He stepped out the car and had my door open before I could even reach for the handle. That was the second time he'd gotten my door for me. So he was a gentleman. Who would have thought? We walked into the studio together, and Craig gave me the stink eye. I knew he wanted to say something to me about walking in with the lead actor of the show, but felt like keeping his job, so he kept his mouth shut. I sipped my smoothie, almost forgotten in the crazy events of the morning. James, Carson said as a guy with blonde hair tucked behind his ears and a gray baseball hat on backward walked up to us. This is the lovely lady with that car that needs to be towed. Yes, sir, James said, I just heard from the towing company. They have her car on the way to the shop right now. Perfect. Carson turned to me. If you could provide him with your key so he can get it to the mechanic. I dug my keys from my purse and removed my car key from the small bundle of keys on my keychain, feeling at a loss for words. I handed the single key to Carson and dropped my keys back into my purse. I knew I needed to thank Carson, but I still didn't understand why he was helping me when he didn't have to. Chapter 5. Ready to go, sweet pea. Carson asked when we had wrapped for the night. It had been a shorter day, and we still had an hour or so until dinner time. I followed him to his car, and we chatted about how the filming had gone. What's it like, working with Cheyenne? I asked. She's a hard worker, he said, his voice guarded. I'd seen a few instances earlier where she'd acted a bit like a diva, and I wondered how she treated Carson since he was more or less her equal on set. Do you prefer filming at the studio or on location? I asked. I like filming at the studio because I keep a lot of my stuff in my dressing room here that I like to access between shoots, he said. We climbed into his car, and he said, "Okay, where to?" He handed me his phone with his GPS pulled up. I punched in my address, and he set it in the mount on his dash that doubled as a wireless charger. Only 8 minutes away. Not a bad commute. Nope, I said. We have to be back on set tomorrow at 10. Want me to pick you up at 9:30? He asked. What about my car? James called in right before we wrapped. Apparently, this place was a little backed up, so they didn't get to your car today, but I can have him give them your number so they can notify you when it's done. Sure, I said. I grabbed his phone and entered my info into his contacts. Whoa, easy there, he said. Don't clear out the GPS, he said, grabbing for his phone. I swept it away from him. I won't. I finished putting in my number and remounted his phone. See? No big deal. It's not like I don't know how to get home anyway. A few minutes later, he pulled into the driveway, and I climbed out. Thanks for the ride. I smiled at him. I really do appreciate it. He saluted me. 9:30. Yep. I looked into his blue eyes, and for a minute I thought about inviting him inside, but I shook off the crazy idea. I couldn't go around inviting celebrities into my house. He would think I was a total weirdo. I unlocked the front door, and Zoe was perched on the couch with a textbook spread in front of her. Aleyna. How's the new job going? And who's this guy who was at breakfast with you? Oh, he's just one of my coworkers. He happened to be at the right place at the right time. I just got lucky, I guess. He sounded pretty eager to help you. It sounded like he was a little more than just interested in helping you get to work. I think he has a thing for you. There was no way that was possible. Carson Peters could probably have any girl he wanted. He was just in the right place at the right time. That's all there was to it. I want you to meet Wyatt. We're getting together to play pool with some friends tonight, and I need a wing girl. Are you free tonight? As a matter of fact, I am, I said. And pool sounds fabulous. It feels like forever since I've done something fun. I'm with you on that. If I don't take a break from studying, my brain is going to explode. Later that night, I took extra care to get dressed up, because who knew? Zoe's boyfriend might have some cute friends. Zoe and I drove over to the pool hall together, and the parking lot was so packed we had to park in the next lot. I'm glad you're with me, she said. Walking down a dark street in Decatur by myself isn't my favorite idea, she said. We pulled open the heavy doors and walked inside. Wyatt from set stood 2 pool tables down, twisting chalk over the tip of his pool stick. Zoe ran up to him, and he threw his arms around her tiny waist. It was then that I realized that Zoe's boyfriend, Wyatt, and Carson's stand-in, Wyatt, was the same person. We looked at each other in recognition and pointed at the same time. Wyatt. I had no idea you're dating Zoe. She looked between us. Do you guys know each other? Yeah, Wyatt said. She's the new stand-in for Cheyenne. Aleyna, you didn't tell me you were working on Devastation. I didn't. I could have sworn I did. Just then, the doors of the pool hall opened, and Carson walked inside. I gaped at him. I knew Wyatt and Carson were friendly with each other, but I didn't realize that they hung out after working hours. "Is that your brother?" Zoe asked, nuzzling up to Wyatt. "His brother." "Sure is." He stepped toward Carson, pulling Zoe with him. "Ready to play some pool?" Carson asked. His eyes fell on me, and a corner of his mouth pulled up. "You invited Aleyna?" he asked Wyatt. Zoe spoke up. "Aleyna's my roommate." "Ha. Small world," Carson said. "Is anyone else coming?" I asked. I asked a few of the crew members from set, but they all had other plans or didn't respond, Wyatt said. "It looks like it's just the four of us tonight." Great. Zoe and Wyatt were all over each other, which left Carson looking an awful lot like a date I hadn't planned on that night. Wyatt passed out the pool sticks, and we began our first game of pool. Carson placed the triangle over the balls and took the first move. He cracked the perfect formation of balls, and they scattered, 4 of the balls darting into pockets. "Stripes," he said. He walked around the table toward me to take another shot. He stepped close to me, and I took a step back to give him some space, but not before I caught a whiff of his body spray. He smelled so good that I had to close my eyes to keep them from rolling back in my head. So this is what this guy did to the other girls. He bent over the table and positioned his pool stick in line with a striped ball near a pocket. Carson hit the ball into the hole. "Nice shot," Wyatt said. Carson walked around the table to a new position with a serious expression on his face. He hit 3 more balls into pockets before he missed. Finally, I said, "Were you planning to let anyone else play tonight?" Carson looked me right in the eye. "Calm yourself right on down, sweet pea. You'll get your turn soon enough." I blushed, sensing a double meaning behind his words. The funny thing was, despite all my efforts to push him away, part of me wanted to see what a turn with Carson Peters was like, whatever that meant. But whatever my turn with him was, I knew he would guarantee that it would be the most amazing I'd ever experienced. Carson clearly knew what he was doing with a woman. I had no idea how I knew it, but I sensed it and didn't doubt it in the slightest. And that made me want him all the more. The next morning, Zoe and I went running in our neighborhood with Oscar. It was our weekend morning ritual, and we tried to do it every Saturday and Sunday morning. We both loved getting up early and exercising. We jogged past a few mothers pushing strollers and a handful of other runners, but for the most part, the streets were deserted. We breathed in the cool, morning air, and it smelled of earth, pine needles, and blossoms. Many people described Decatur as the Brooklyn of Atlanta, only with more strollers than hipsters. It was true. It seemed like every corner had a church with a daycare. Church marquees announced preschool enrollment for the following year. After overhearing the moms around town talk, I got the impression that some of them could be competitive. Decatur was also known as the Harvard Square of Atlanta, and with all the grad students around came young families trying their best to get their preschoolers the best education around. Zoe and I turned the corner, and a sleek, modern apartment building came into view. Well, it kind of looked like an apartment building. It was a house that had had 2 stories added onto it within recent years. Someone had put quite a bit of money into the place. Another runner approached us on the sidewalk about 3 houses down. He was running with a chocolate lab, and he was shirtless. Even from several houses down, I could tell he was in excellent shape. He wasn't bulky, but rather had a lean, well-defined physique. As we ran closer to him, I recognized him. It was Carson. A split second after my discovery, recognition dawned on his face as well. "Hey, Carson," Zoe said. I was wondering if we'd bump into you this morning. She was. She hadn't bothered mentioning that to me. He slowed to a stop. Hey, he said. His dog sniffed Oscar with enthusiasm. Carson's chest shone in the early morning sunlight, covered in a light sheen of sweat. You guys want to come inside for some water? He asked. I'm just right here. He indicated the modern structure we'd just seen. Sure, Zoe said. I want to go see if I can wake Wyatt up. He's already up, Carson said. He went to the gym earlier. He should be getting back soon. We followed Carson to his house. He put his dog in the backyard and invited us to bring Oscar inside with us. He opened the door for us and led us up a flight of stairs. Nice place, I said, looking around the spotless, modern interior with a large, open floor plan. Yeah. Thanks. The owner added on this apartment to the original structure. He lives in there and rents this place out to me. Oscar sniffed around, but Zoe kept him close with the leash to keep him from getting any big ideas. Does Wyatt live here, too? I asked. Yep. It works for him because it's close to campus. When spring semester ended and we had an opening for my stand-in, I let him know, and he took on the project for the summer to come up with some extra cash. It's not a bad gig, which I'm sure you'll recognize soon if you haven't already. I'm guessing you and Wyatt are the same height and probably weigh about the same, so it worked out well to put him in as your stand-in. I said. Exactly, Carson said, opening the cabinet and pulling out 2 glasses. He took them to the fridge and turned to us. Ice? No, thanks, I said. I don't like ice when I'm super thirsty. Please, said Zoe. Carson filled our cups and passed them to us. As we drank, he opened the stainless steel fridge and pulled out a carton of almond milk. After I run, I usually either go to Hale Me Crazy, or I make my own version of their recharge smoothie. It's perfect for a post-workout drink. Interested in trying it out? What's in it? Zoe asked. Kale, chard, he said, as he pulled 2 green, leafy bundles from the fridge. Banana, vegan protein, and coconut yogurt. I've gotten the recharge a few times. I'm interested to see how your version compares to theirs. Carson blended up our smoothies and poured them into glasses for us. Zoe and I settled onto the couch in his living room. Oscar curled up on the thick shag carpet at our feet. The wall in front of us was all glass and overlooked a big backyard where his dog was napping in the morning sun. I sipped the smoothie through the straw he dropped into my cup and concentrated on the flavors. I nodded. This is amazing, Carson. I like it better than the one at Hale Me Crazy. I think you added a bit more chard than they do, but the flavor is really nice. I do what I can, Carson said with a smile. Aleyna, you should show Carson your YouTube channel, Zoe said. She makes videos on smoothie making. Aleyna makes a killer berry spinach smoothie. Oh really, now? Carson said, picking up his iPad from the coffee table and punching in his password. He opened the YouTube app. What's the channel? You aren't really going to watch that, are you? I asked. It's not very good. It's called Cooking with Aleyna, Zoe said, ignoring my mild protest. Oh my gosh. Please don't watch that. Carson punched in the search. Ah. There it is, he said with his signature smile. Well, don't you look adorable, sweet pea? Wait a second. Where's that subscribe button? Oh, look. There it is. Let me just hit that right now. I groaned inwardly as my voice came over his speaker, and fought the urge to bury my face in my hands. His eyes focused on the screen, and I fought off a blush. I felt so stupid. My lame jokes, the tone of my voice. I hated hearing myself talking. It was ironic how much I wanted to see myself on screen until I actually did. I guess I was a glutton for punishment. The video ended, and Carson looked up at me. "This is really good, Aleyna." His sarcastic tone was gone. "You're a natural in front of the camera. You put this in front of the right people, and you could find yourself in a very successful career. If you want, I can pull some strings for you. Get this to the right people." My heart soared for a split second, but I smashed the daydream before it got out of hand. "Oh, that's not necessary." "Thank you, though," I said. I didn't need him to bail me out of my failure. I was perfectly capable of landing a role the same way everyone else did. It was only doing what was fair. He shrugged. "Suit yourself," he said, laying his iPad back on the coffee table. The front door opened, and Wyatt appeared in the doorway. Zoe's face lit up. "Hey, you," she said. She got up and crossed the room with Oscar at her heels, his tail wagging with excitement. They put their foreheads close together, speaking softly for a moment until Oscar gave a few barks. Wyatt laughed and bent down to pat his head to give him a proper welcome. Oscar had grown fond of Wyatt, and I hadn't even realized it. He grabbed her hand and led her to the staircase, looking over at me sitting on the leather sectional with Carson. "Hey there, Aleyna." He and Zoe disappeared upstairs with Oscar following closely behind. Carson turned back to me with a satisfied smile on his face, like he enjoyed watching his brother's happiness. He looked at me with a question in his eyes. "Are you busy tonight?" "I have an audition this afternoon, but after that I'm free," I said. "Why do you ask?" "I have an extra ticket to go see Phantom of the Opera at the Fox Theater tonight, and it would be an awful shame to let that go to waste." "Are you asking me on a date, Carson?" "I am." "Are you accepting my offer?" "I would love to go out with you tonight," I said. He smiled. "Excellent." Chapter 6. I walked from the building with a bounce in my step and crossed the busy street when the traffic stopped and the crosswalk sign changed. I pulled out my phone and dialed Zoe. "How was the audition, girl?" she asked. "I totally nailed it," I said. The director actually laughed at my jokes. I have never had an audition go so well. I feel like my luck is finally turning around. "That's so great. If you weren't going out with Mr. Famous tonight, I'd say let's celebrate, but I'm pretty sure he's going to surpass anything I could come up with. How about I make you look super hot for him instead?" I laughed. "Go for it." 2 hours later, I stood in front of the floor-length mirror mounted on my closet door and inspected my reflection. I had on a black cocktail dress from Zoe's closet that revealed more cleavage than I normally showed. Crystal droplet earrings fell from my ears, and my hair was swept back from my face in soft curls. I pinched my cheeks and grabbed a blush palette. "Why did I have to be so pasty?" I blurted. "You're a redhead who comes from a long line of Scottish people. What do you expect?" "I wish I could be more tanned like you," I said, inspecting her golden skin. "My dad's black." "It kind of comes with the territory," she said, looking at me like I was nuts. I grinned back at her. Zoe and I had been having this conversation since we were 13. "I'm not sure about this dress," I said, adjusting the strapless push-up bra Zoe had insisted I wear. Honestly, I wasn't so sure that going on this date was the best idea. What was I supposed to do if it didn't go well? I'd have to see Carson day after day on set, and that could get awkward fast. "The dress fits you perfectly. And your boobs look amazing. You really should be more proud of your body." I am proud of my body. I'm just not so sure about showing off so much of it, that's all. The doorbell rang. I grabbed my clutch and walked across the floor in the heels Zoe had convinced me to wear. I opened the door, and Carson smiled at me. He handed me a bouquet of red roses. "Wow," I said, taking them from him. "Thank you." No one had ever gotten me flowers, unless you counted the corsage my dates got me for high school dances, which I didn't. I'd only dated one other guy seriously, Nate, my on and off again high school boyfriend. When he cheated on me with a girl on the debate team, I'd called it quits. Ever since then, I hadn't had much time for guys. I was too focused on landing auditions and honing my acting skills. I looked at the flowers and wasn't sure what to do with them. Did Carson want me to bring them along, or was I supposed to put them in a vase? "Carson, aw. You brought her flowers," Zoe said. "Want me to put them in a vase for you so you can get going, Aleyna?" Zoe asked. "Sure. Thanks," I smiled at Zoe, grateful for the rescue. When I'd snapped on my seatbelt and Carson was backing out of my driveway, he said, "I hope you're hungry. I got us reservations at this little place called Aria." I hadn't heard of it. Carson drove us to Buckhead, past the Ritz-Carlton and some of the more upscale shopping centers in Atlanta. When we walked into Aria, I fought to keep my expression neutral. I'd never been in such a nice restaurant. Everything in the room was black or white. The tables were covered with white cloths, fresh flowers, and formal place settings. Most people would need etiquette classes to know how to navigate this restaurant properly. Carson pulled out my upholstered chair, and I sat, smoothing my full skirt. The waiter appeared, and Carson ordered artesian water and a platter of hummus. "Can you have the kitchen bring vegetables with the pita bread that normally comes with the hummus?" "Absolutely, sir." "Is there anything else I can bring you?" "No. That will be all," Carson said. "You remembered," I said when the waiter returned to the kitchen. My heart began to swell within my chest. "Don't fall for him, Aleyna. He's going to break your heart. It's what players like him do." "We wouldn't want you getting sick," he said with a grin that left my traitorous heart fluttering. The waiter returned with a tall glass bottle of artesian water and untwisted the lid, breaking the seal, and filled our glasses. "Are you ready to order?" the waiter asked. I nodded, and Carson said, "Yes. I'll have the creamless celery root soup and the spaghetti squash. And I'll have the yellowtail." I closed the menu and handed it back to the waiter. He left, and I took a sip. The cool water was crisp on my tongue. "Refreshing," I said. "This is the best water I've ever had," Carson said. He leaned back in his chair, the corners of his mouth bending up. "I'm a sucker for good food." "Just vegetarian food," I added. "Precisely," he said, jabbing a finger at me with a crooked grin. "How did your audition go?" "It was amazing. It's just an indie film, but still, it was fun to do something with horror." Hey. Every audition counts as acting experience. I guess that's true. I hadn't thought about it that way. Think you'll get a call back? I hope so. The director really liked me. The waiter reappeared after a few moments and brought out a basket of ciabatta bread. Carson took a slice and smeared butter across it. He took a bite and closed his eyes. "Amazing." I smiled. "Bread is bad news for me." "Sorry. Better not try it. It's amazing, but totally not worth it. Believe me. I never cheat. I'll be sick for hours." After a few times of that, you realize bread isn't that great after all. "I can imagine," Carson said. "What made you want to become a vegetarian?" I asked. "I'm not so much into the killing animals thing. It's a matter of principle for me. I can't bring myself to do it. He took a sip from his goblet and spun the glass in his hand slowly, staring at the remaining water moving around. But that's just my personal stance. I don't judge what other people want to do. I don't judge you for eating that innocent piece of bread either, I said with a straight face. He smiled lightly. The server returned with the hummus, pita, and vegetables. I picked up a carrot and dipped it in the smooth mixture. This is delicious, I said. He picked up a chunk of pita bread and scooped up some hummus. Amazing. Right? I took a piece of celery and dipped it into the hummus. It's addicting. You know the interesting thing about this place, he said. They change their menu every night. I usually check the website to see what they're serving that night before I decide whether I want to come here. Do you eat out a lot? I asked. It depends on how much I'm working. I eat on set a lot. James is good about bringing me food. The food on set will put some weight on you if you're not careful, he said. I know what you mean. At least you don't have to eat what they give the extras. And neither do you. Not anymore. Thank goodness for that. Some sets are pretty good about letting the background workers eat with the crew. Yeah. I've worked a few shows like that as well, he admitted. Have you done a lot of background work? I nodded. I've more or less supported myself on background work for the last year. You can do that? Carson asked. It's not fun, but yes. If you know the right Facebook pages to follow and the right websites to sign up for emails from, you can get background work 4 to 5 days a week. That's a bit of a generous estimate, but I've had a few weeks like that. Carson shook his head. We're going to make sure you have steady work from here on out. I sat back in my chair, my pulse racing. Carson made it sound like we were a team. I raised a skeptical brow. How did I even know he'd be talking to me tomorrow, let alone helping me to find more work whenever my gig with Devastation ended? A few minutes later, our food arrived. It looks too pretty to eat, I said. Carson laughed. I don't even feel a little bit guilty about it. I took a bite of the fish. How is it? He asked. Light, flaky, and fresh tasting, I said. I'll have to take your word for it, he replied. I haven't had fish since I was 7. My dad took me fishing, and I ended up crying myself to sleep after realizing that I was eating the innocent fish I'd caught. A giggle bubbled up from my throat, and I attempted to hide it behind my linen napkin. Laugh all you want, he said. It was serious business to me as a 7-year-old. I believe you. It's just cute, I said. Wyatt's not a vegetarian though, is he? I asked, remembering how Wyatt had eaten meat on set. Wyatt's a total meat and potatoes kind of guy. You guys look so much alike, but you're so different at the same time. You have no idea, Carson said. You should hear us talk about politics sometime. I laughed. Let me take a wild guess. You're not the conservative one. He flashed a smile. How'd you figure that out? Lucky guess. I said. We finished the rest of our dinner and Carson paid the bill. I have a question for you, he said as we got into the car. I know you guys have Oscar, but are you more of a cat person or a dog person? Cat person, I said, impressed he'd remembered Oscar's name. You? Cat person, he said. But you have a dog, too. He's Wyatt's dog. I just take him running from time to time. Oscar is Zoe's, I said. We parked and then walked over to the Fox Theater. You have no idea how excited I am for this, I said. How excited are you for this? He asked as we stepped onto the sidewalk in front of the theater. freaking excited. It's my favorite musical, and I haven't seen it since I was 14. Mine too. But I think most people would say Phantom is their favorite. Yes, but I'm a musical person. I did a few shows in high school. I used to write musicals when I was. I stopped mid-sentence and gasped. Several flashes popped up from beside us and Carson blocked the lights with an arm, pulling me close to him and rushing us forward. He swore under his breath and jerked open one of the heavy golden doors to the building. How'd they find me here? Had he told someone in public that he was coming here tonight? I gulped. What magazines was I going to end up in now? But the worry flew from my mind as I took in my new surroundings. It looked like we just walked into a lavish Egyptian palace. Everything was gold, ornate, and carved. The lobby was enormous with gigantic pillars lining the walls. Carson chuckled. I take it you've never been here before. He took my hand and led me across the massive lobby. You think this is amazing? Wait until we get inside the theater. He led me up the grand staircase, and I couldn't keep my eyes from roaming all over the room, my senses overwhelmed by the amazing space. Carson's eyes twinkled as he took in my sense of awe. He led me through a doorway, and I couldn't keep my eyes from widening. These are our seats? I asked. He'd led me to a private box with an excellent view of the stage. You like them? He asked. Are you kidding? These seats are amazing. His mouth turned up, and I could tell he was proud of himself. This guy didn't mess around when it came to first dates. But why me? Why go through all this for someone like me? I took the seat next to him and paged through the program he'd picked up from one of the ushers on the way to our seats. The lights dimmed, and the show began. I didn't want to miss a single moment. Occasionally, Carson leaned over, his ear brushing mine, to comment on the performance. Every time he did it, my breath caught, and my heart pounded. Just after the intermission, he took my hand and laced his fingers through mine. I wrapped my fingers around his and leaned onto his shoulder. I had no idea what cologne he was wearing, but it smelled expensive, and judging by everything else I'd noticed about him, it probably was. The more I breathed in his smell, the more I longed for him. As the show progressed, it became hard to focus on the stage. Carson stroked his thumb over the back of my hand, and I melted further into him. I was getting sucked in, and I was completely powerless to stop it. Somewhere in the back of my mind, a little voice called to me, warning me that what I was about to do was dangerous and reckless. Carson had a reputation for being a player. What if his gentlemanly behavior was just a ploy to get me to drop my boundaries so that he could get what he wanted from me only to move on to the next girl? I fully recognized the possibility. But I didn't care. Nothing mattered anymore. Not the show, not the consequences of what I was about to do. My breath picked up in ragged inhalations, and when I lifted my head from Carson's shoulder, time stopped. The show vanished away, and I lifted my eyes to his face. He turned and gazed into my eyes. I froze, staring at him, his jagged breaths touching my face. His breath smelled intoxicating, and he leaned in until just the tips of our noses were touching. We stayed like that for a moment, just breathing together, absorbing each other's presences. Then, without warning, his lips were on mine. I responded immediately, and then my hands were in his hair and his arms were around my back. I pulled him in closer, but I couldn't get close enough. The taste of him drove me wild, and I had to have more like an addict on cocaine. His tongue flicked between my lips, and I moaned. I ran my fingers through his hair, down his neck, and over his muscled arms. There was a current between us so strong I had never imagined such a thing existed. We separated, gasping for breath, but then leaned in for more. Finally, we pulled away as the lead actress on stage hit a high note. I couldn't stop smiling. I was completely hooked. After that, how could I ever have another kiss that would pass it up? I looked back at him, and he caught my eye and turned to look at me, his eyes softening. He leaned until his nose touched mine again, and he kissed me again, this time a small, sweet peck. He ran a hand down my arm and laced his fingers through mine again. I leaned my head on his shoulder and kept it there for the remainder of the show. Chapter 7. The next morning was Sunday. I woke up to a knock on my front door. I climbed from my bed and threw on a tank top and shorts. I pulled my hair into a messy bun and put on a pair of glasses. I opened the door, resisting the urge to rub the sleep from my eyes. "Hey there, sweet pea. You look gorgeous when you first wake up." A slow, dreamy smile crossed my face, and I let out a soft laugh. "I brought you breakfast," he said. That was when I noticed he was holding a cup from Hale Me Crazy. "Oh, my gosh. I love your face," I blurted and then blushed. He laughed. "Oh, come in," I said, opening the door wider. "Sorry, it's a mess. Wyatt and Zoe had a big study party here last night," I said, indicating the pizza box and the empty energy drinks scattered across the coffee table. "You don't have to explain it to me. I live with the guy. Let's just say he's not the clean one in the household. Zoe and I take turns being the clean ones." I heard my name, she mumbled from the other end of the house. "Go back to sleep, Zoe," I said, chuckling. "Do you have a guy over?" Her groggy voice came from her bedroom again. She snorted, and it came out sounding like she was slightly drunk. That's a first. I reddened. Did she really have to announce my lack of a love life right now? "Hey, Zoe. It's Carson," he said. "Rough night?" "Ugh. Too much talking. Don't like it." I laughed. "Do you want to take a walk?" I asked. "Sure," I slipped on a pair of flip-flops. We walked down the sidewalk, enjoying the early morning Sunday. "This is my favorite time of day," I said. "Same," Carson agreed. "Don't get me wrong. I enjoy a good nightlife with the rest of them, but there's something magical about the quiet of the early morning. I'm a sucker for a good sunrise. Especially over the beach." "What's your favorite beach?" I asked. "Probably Monterey, California," he said. "But you can't see good sunrises there. When I was a kid, we went to Tybee Island off the coast of Georgia every year. You can see the most amazing sunrises there." He touched my messy bun. "This is hot." I shoved my glasses back up my nose. "This?" I asked, indicating my hair. "This is a disaster. How do you think I got cast as an extra on Devastation? They were looking for people who look like refugees." He laughed. "I told you. You dirty up nice." He nudged me as we walked. "You looked beautiful and polished last night, but there's something so attractive to me about a girl with natural curl to her hair who isn't afraid to just let it be what it wants to be. So many girls spend all this time with their blow dryers and flat irons, or whatever it is you ladies use, but I say just let it loose and wild and free." Wow. You really feel passionate about this, don't you? Well, I'm glad to help you out this morning with my messiness. You don't do this much, do you? What? Take walks with hot celebrity guys early in the mornings? Nope. I can't say I do. He smirked at me. You know what I mean. Only I didn't. I guessed he was referring to Zoe's comment that stated the fact that I never brought guys over to the house, and especially not early in the morning. Did Zoe in her half-asleep state, think that Carson had slept over. She had been totally passed out when Carson dropped me off last night. I don't date a lot, if that's what you mean. I had a boyfriend in high school, but since then, I've mostly focused on my acting career. Carson furrowed his brow, but didn't say anything. Have you ever been to Tulila Gorge? He asked. No. I've never heard of it. It's this amazing canyon about an hour and a half north of Atlanta. I hear you can swim in the water and they have these sliding rocks you can go down like natural water slides. Are you suggesting something, Carson? Do you want to go? Like, right now? Yes. Right now. When's the last time you just picked up and left at the last minute? I gave him a wry smile. I've been doing background work for the last year. 90% of the jobs I get are last minute. I'm not talking about work. I mean, when is the last time you've just taken off and left to go on an adventure for no reason? I don't know. Aleyna, you're always on some film set, acting out someone else's adventures, but when do you make time to live your own adventures? I don't, I said, realizing he was right. Outside of all the film sets I'd been on, I hadn't done anything fun for myself. Well, let's go then. Let's grab a cooler from my place, and we'll fill it up with food and just take off for the day. I couldn't stop the smile that spread across my lips. Okay. He walked me home, and I locked myself in my bedroom and dug through the basket of swimsuits I kept on a shelf in my closet. I grabbed a black bikini and changed into it. I brushed out my hair and then pulled it back into a ponytail. I slipped into a clean pair of denim shorts and a purple tank top and laced up a pair of Nikes. Half an hour later, we were on our way to the gorge. We took turns putting on songs, and I discovered that Carson's taste in music was similar to my own. Song after song, he played another of my favorites or something that I hadn't heard, but immediately liked. We listened to rap, hip-hop, 90s, alternative, the Beatles. I have literally never met anyone with taste in music this close to mine, I said. Carson shrugged. What can I say? I know what the good stuff is. Apparently, I said. We arrived at the gorge and unloaded the cooler. We settled on a bench and Carson made me a peanut butter jelly sandwich with gluten-free bread. You know, I said. For someone with such impeccable taste in food, I'm surprised that you're going for the simple PB&J today. Sweet pea, he said. I may look like a celebrity to the casual observer, but underneath it all, I'm just a regular guy. Yes, I like nice things, but I didn't grow up this way. I still like to keep it simple and cheap once in a while. We went inside the visitor center and found a map, locating the sliding rocks, before we hit the trail. We crossed swinging bridges and passed waterfalls and breathtaking views. Birds of prey soared overhead, searching for their lunch. We made it to the sliding rock and took turns sliding down, screaming as the cold water hit us. I climbed from the water, pulling my wet hair from its ponytail and wringing it out, before twisting it back up into a bun. Wait a second, Carson said, stepping close to me. Did you know, he said, inching closer until he stood chest to chest with me. My breath caught, and I lifted my eyes to his. That I am very turned on by your hair being wet and down like that. His eyes were full of desire before he lowered his mouth to mine and kissed me, wrapping his arms around me. I said, leaning back to look up at him. You're really good at that. I traced his lips with my finger before burying it into his lush brown hair. His bright blue eyes softened and a side of his mouth pulled up into his signature smile. You're not so bad yourself. Monday morning, Carson texted me at 7:30. I'm heading over early so we can get smoothies. 8:30 sound good? I peeked out my living room curtain at 8:29 and saw Carson's BMW pull up into the driveway. "See you later, Zoe," I called out. We pulled up to Call Me Crazy, and he bought us both smoothies. I was grateful to see that there was no trace of the paparazzi today. When we were back in his car, I leaned over and kissed him. "Thanks for the smoothie." I smiled at him. "No problem, sweet pea." It was a busy day for filming, and we didn't get the chance to see each other much on set, other than a few stolen kisses in his trailer. Carson had a lot of extra scenes that Cheyenne wasn't in, so I ended up spending most of the day hanging out in the stand-in tent, looking up future monologues, scrolling through my Facebook feed, and checking my email and Actors Access with the hope that another audition might pop up. Just after 2:30, my phone rang with a Georgia number I didn't recognize. I swiped the screen to answer the call. "Hello." "Hi, Aleyna." "Yes." "Hi. This is Ebony from Freaky Film Productions. How are you?" My heart sped up. The call back. "I'm great. We would like to invite you to callbacks tomorrow evening at 5. Would we be wrapped by then?" I had no idea, but I'd just have to chance it. "Sure thing," I said, pushing down a wave of anxiety. "Great. See you then." I blew out a puff of air and decided I needed a snack to get my mind off the stress. I wove through the trailers and stepped over huge bundles of cords that connected to the lighting and cameras where they were filming. Finally, I found the crafty tent, and I browsed the huge selection of snacks. I picked out a banana, and as I reached for a bag of pistachios, I overheard voices on the other side of the tent from me. "Hey, Carson, how did Maddie like Phantom?" one of them asked. "She ended up bailing last minute," Carson said. "Lame. Those were nice tickets, too." "Come on, Dave," an older guy said. "You know he picked up some hot chick to take with him. We're talking about the mighty Carson Peters. He doesn't go to Phantom dateless." "Oh, is that what they say about me behind my back around here?" Carson laughed. I crushed the package of nuts in my fist. I was just a last-minute fill-in date. That's all I was to him. Carson turned the corner and stood face to face with me. "Aleyna," he said. He took in my dark expression. "You just heard that." It wasn't a question. "I did," I said in a tight voice. I'd let myself feel something for him. Why was I so stupid? "Can I talk to you for a minute?" He glanced at the crew member running the crafty tent. "Sure," I said. The last thing we needed was rumors flying around set about our issues. Why was he still trying to spend time with me? I kept expecting him to drop me cold, but he kept coming back, popping up out of nowhere. Carson led me to a secluded spot behind a row of trailers. He turned to me, his blue eyes looking deep into mine with an intense expression. "Aleyna, I want you to know something. Regardless of what I had planned before I met you, I have had an amazing time with you the past few days." I studied his face. Was he just saying this because he was embarrassed that he got caught, or did he honestly feel something for me? "I'd like to keep seeing you," Carson said. I looked back at him, my heart conflicted. How could I trust him? "I can't do this," I whispered. I'd been so stupid to let my guard down with him. "Aleyna, wait," he called out. But I turned and fled back to the safety of the stand-in tent. Wyatt didn't look up from his book when I entered, and I didn't say anything to him to indicate that anything was wrong. I sat stiffly in my chair with my body angled away from Wyatt in case he happened to look up and see the expression on my face. The last thing I wanted right now was for him to start asking questions. After we'd wrapped for the day, Carson showed up at my tent. "Aleyna, ready to go?" I looked up at him and kept my face impassive. I'd been so upset that I'd forgotten that he was my ride home. If I'd thought of it sooner, I would have called Zoe to pick me up. I grabbed my phone and thought about making the call anyway. But I looked up into Carson's eyes and saw true remorse there. I let out a puff of air. "Yeah, let me just grab my stuff," I said, hating myself as I said it. I scooped up the bag I'd brought with me for the day. As we walked to the car, he said, "You're still upset about what you overheard earlier, aren't you?" I let out a puff of air. "Honestly, I don't know what to expect from you. I don't know if you're actually interested in me or if you just think I'm another girl to toy with." He stopped walking and turned toward me, looking me straight in the eye. "I would never toy with you, Aleyna. And I mean that. Your feelings matter to me." I studied his earnest expression as my heart battled within me. "Okay," he asked, still locking eyes with me. I nodded slowly. "Okay." When we got to the car, he said, "Are you hungry?" I hesitated before answering. I wasn't sure I wanted to move forward with him when my heart was already this invested. There was too much at risk. But I was starving, and I knew my fridge at home was bare. My weak stomach got the better of me. "I could eat," I said, keeping my voice light. "Good. There's someplace I want to take you." Carson drove me to Buckhead again, only this time he took me to a pizza place. He did realize that I couldn't eat pizza, right? I know what you're thinking. You can wipe that worried look right off your face. This place is known for their gluten-free pizza. I stared at him, and the anger and distrust I'd felt for him earlier began to melt away. "How did you know about this?" "Well, there's this amazing tool called the internet. You really should check it out sometime. You looked this up just for me." My heart warmed in my chest again. Well, I had selfish reasons behind it. "I happen to love pizza," Carson said as he opened one of the double doors of the building. But Carson wasn't being selfish at all. He could have gotten dinner wherever he wanted, somewhere closer to home. He was probably tired after a long day on set. But instead, he chose to drive all the way to Buckhead just so I could eat pizza, too. Maybe I had misjudged him too quickly. I followed him inside, and we ordered a couple of pizzas. I picked out a gluten-free pizza with meat on it, and Carson ordered a regular crust pizza with ricotta and mozzarella. "Between the two of us, it's a wonder we find anything to eat," I said, filling my glass with ice at the beverage station. I slid next to him in the booth he picked out and snuggled up. Something buzzed between us, and I realized it was my phone in the pocket of the light jacket I had on. I pulled it out and saw a local number calling. "Hello?" "Yes, this is Aleyna." "Okay. What's the total? Is it that much? Is there any way you can lower the price of the repair? Can I get back to you about this? It's not a good time." I set my phone on the table. "How much do they want for the repair?" Carson asked. I buried my head in my arms. "Hey. Talk to me," Carson said in a gentle voice. I lifted my head an inch, just enough to see him watching me with worry in his eyes. "There's no way I can pay this. They want over $2,000 to fix my car." "What? That's nuts." He said there are multiple problems that are interrelated. "What are you going to do?" "I have no idea. Maybe I'll just have to start taking the bus until I can save enough to pay for it." "Aleyna," Carson said. "I hope you know I'm not going to let you take the bus." I stared back at him. "That works for now, but what about when I get another job? You're not going to be able to keep giving me rides. We'll figure something out." My phone vibrated on the table, and a picture of my mom lit up the screen. "Hi, Mom. What's wrong, honey?" I just got a call from the repair shop. It's going to cost over $2,000 to fix everything on my car. I don't know what I'm going to do." My voice broke, and I wiped back a tear with the back of my hand. The bills from the past year, always barely scraping by, weighed so heavily. I don't know how much longer I can keep doing this. "Aleyna, you need to come home. Enough is enough. I'm terrified to think about you barely getting by." "I don't want to come home, Mom," I said, my voice elevated with frustration. "I just need my car fixed." "Calm down. It was just a suggestion. Let me talk to your dad, and we'll see what we can do." I sighed. "Okay. Thanks, Mom." "What's the name of the repair shop?" she asked. "I'll have your dad call them in the morning and talk to them." I gave her the information and ended the call with a sigh, burying my face into Carson's shoulder. The next day on set drug on for what seemed like forever. The later the day stretched on, the more nervous I felt about being able to make my call back. I wanted that role so badly. I imagined how fun it would be to be a part of a real film with a large speaking role. I longed for the experience, the energy of working with other actors. Being stuck as a stand-in was beginning to drive me nuts. Even though I still struggled to feel comfortable in front of the camera, I wanted more than anything to overcome my discomfort. I wanted to feel alive in the spotlight. To bask in the attention. I wanted to move audiences with my performances and inspire other actors to keep reaching for their dreams because they were actually attainable. But if we didn't wrap early, there was no chance that I would get this role. What if we ended up filming until 9 or 10 tonight? Would I be able to sneak off set before that without them noticing? It was a huge gamble to make because if they decided they needed me and I was gone, I would be fired for sure. And it could all be for nothing because a callback was only a callback, not a job offer. After I finished standing in for Cheyenne near a pond, I began walking up the trail that led away from the water and toward my stand-in tent. As I passed, I overheard some crew members mentioning that we would be wrapping soon and my heart lifted. "Aleyna," Xavier said, as I approached my tent. "Hey, Xavier. What's up?" I asked. "The director wants to see you," he said. "Oh," I said. I was just next to him. "Yeah. He told me to grab you just as you were walking off." We went back to the pond, and I stood off to the side while Carson and Cheyenne filmed their scene. When the director called, "Cut," he spotted me and waved me over. "Aleyna." The director tucked a pen behind his ear and turned to me. "We've been impressed with your professionalism on the set, and we'd like to offer you a full-time position as Cheyenne's stand-in." I stared back at him. "Is that something you'd be able to do?" My heart fought within me. On one hand, I had the possibility of landing a role that would take me one step closer to my dreams, but on the other hand, I needed the steady paycheck my stand-in work would provide. As much as it broke my heart, I found myself saying, "Yes, sir. Thank you for the opportunity." I hated the words as they came from my mouth. But I needed the money to be able to fix my car, and this was guaranteed money. With a heavy heart, I went back to my tent and emailed Freaky Film Productions to let them know I wasn't going to make it to my callback. We didn't wrap for the night until after 8. "Hey, Sweet Pea," Carson said, approaching me as we walked from the set to the area where the trailers were lined up. "Ready to get going?" I told him about my permanent position on the show on the way home. "That's fantastic news," he said. "If I wasn't so tired, I'd say let's go celebrate. How about we grab some takeout, go back to my place, and watch a movie instead?" "That sounds amazing," I said. Cuddling with Carson on his couch sounded like heaven after the long day I'd had. "You definitely have a more positive outlook on this than I do," I said. Oh, Carson said, a realization dawning in his eyes as he slowed to stop at a red light. You had a callback today, didn't you? Yep, I said, staring straight ahead. And now because you're permanently on the show, you can't go, he said slowly. Nope. I see, he said. I spotted Carson staring at me from the corner of my eye. And how do you feel about that? He asked. Honestly, I sighed. I'm bummed about it. I had high hopes for that horror film. I really felt like it was the closest I'd ever gotten to a connection with a director. And now I'm stuck here for who knows how long. I see, Carson's voice was quiet. I glanced over at him. I hadn't hurt his feelings, had I? He had been so excited for me to have the permanent position on the show. Was that because he wanted to spend more time with me? I was beginning to wonder if he was interested in something more long-term with me. We hadn't been together very long, but it had been consistently every day. What did that mean? Was I reading too much into this, or did he consider me something more than just another one of the girls he liked to toy with? When Carson dropped me off later that night, I checked my YouTube channel before crawling into bed. My newest video had only gotten 5 views in the past week. I posted on Twitter and Facebook with the hope that it would bring in more views and then checked my email. I had 2 promising audition opportunities sitting in my inbox that I had to ignore. I gritted my teeth. Sure, I had a steady gig on the show, and I'd be able to pay for my car eventually, but I was sacrificing my dreams for the daily grind of nothingness. Chapter 8. A week later, I walked down a wooded path toward the stand-in tent. Today we were filming by a cabin at Lake Lanier. I sunk into my chair and checked the notifications on my phone. I had a missed call from a number I didn't recognize. I checked my voicemail. Aleyna. It's Doug from In-Town Auto Care. I'm calling to let you know your car is ready to be picked up. I crinkled my brow in confusion. I'd been so happy riding with Carson that I hadn't even thought about my car in days. Maybe I'd pushed the thought from my mind because I didn't want my rides with Carson to end. I'd been expecting to hear back from my parents about whether they could pay for it, but I hadn't had a call or text from either of them. I scrolled through my phone, returned the missed call. Hi, I said when a man picked up. This is Aleyna McKenzie. I had a call saying my car is ready for pickup. For the Corolla? He asked. Yes. You can come pick it up at any time. We're open until 6. I'm confused. I never authorized the repair. Did someone call in to pay for it? Ma'am, it says here that your bill has been paid in full. My parents must have come through with the money. Thank you. In that case, I should be able to pick it up tonight. I hung up and called my mom, but she didn't pick up. Aleyna. Xavier popped his head into my tent. Yes. It's that time again, he said with a smile. I hopped from my chair and followed him to set. The day dragged by as I waited to get my car back. I was relieved when we'd finally wrapped for the day. I immediately went to Carson's trailer and knocked on the door. He opened the door and invited me in. Hey there, sweet pea. I sat down as the door to his trailer slammed shut, but he stood in the middle of the room staring at his phone screen. My car is ready to be picked up. Do you think you could help go get it before they close at 6? Sure thing, he said, not looking up from his phone. Everything okay? I asked. Huh? His eyes lifted from the screen. Oh. Yeah. He pocketed his phone. Sorry about that. Ready to go. I'm really glad you were able to get your car fixed, he said as he pulled from the parking area. I am, too. I owe my parents big time for this one. I think I'm going to stop by the store after I grab my car and get them a thank you card or something. You should do that, he said. Carson pulled up to the repair shop. You good? He asked. I blinked. Yes. I'd expected him to want to hang out together. Thank you for the ride. He drove off, and I stood there, stunned. I gripped the strap of my purse and turned toward the repair shop. What was up with him? Once I had my car key back, I climbed into my car and drove to the nearest grocery store. I grabbed some almond milk and then picked out a thank you card and an Olive Garden gift card to tuck inside. I knew it wasn't much, but I wanted to show my parents that I was grateful. The next morning, I dropped the card in the mail before heading to set. It was strange to drive to work without Carson, and a twinge of loneliness settled into my belly. For the next week, Carson grew increasingly distant. It was like, now that my car was fixed, we didn't have a reason to talk. We still sat together at lunch, but he seemed absorbed in what Wyatt had to say and spent most of his lunches arguing with him over politics. Was he tired of me already? I scoured my memories, trying to find one detail of what I must have done wrong, but I couldn't come up with a single thing. One night, the following week, while I was painting my toes red, Zoe came into my room after Wyatt left. Wyatt just told me that they're canceling Devastation. What? When? I asked. They're finishing out the week, and that's it for the show. What's Carson going to do? I asked. He has another gig in California from what I understand. My chest ached. Why hadn't he told me this himself? He must have been so stressed about finding more work. Was this why he'd been so withdrawn lately? It made sense. And then I remembered the day he'd taken me to get my car. He'd been glued to his phone. Was that when he'd gotten the news about the show being cancelled? It had to have been after the director hired me on for the long haul, because otherwise he wouldn't have bothered making it sound like it was a long-term job. It wasn't uncommon for a show to be dropped by the network and quickly finished out like this when the ratings weren't high enough. Once the money was pulled, that was that. It left the entire production scrambling for the next job. Carson had probably been in constant communication with his agent about landing the new job in California. It made sense that he hadn't been talking to me much, but I wished he hadn't just shut me out of his life. It was like he realized he was moving and decided to cut ties before he got too invested in me. But that was what hurt. I wanted him to become invested in me because I was already invested in him. The next day, we were filming an urban warfare scene downtown. When I got to our location, I gathered the courage to confront him about the show ending. After a brief search through the rows of trailers, I found his and knocked on the door. My breath caught when he opened it, and an ache filled my chest as I realized how much I'd missed him. But it was over between us. He'd move on to bigger, better things in California, and I had no idea what my future held. Hi, I said softly. Everything inside me hurt. Hey, he said, looking at me, and for the first time in weeks, his expression was tender toward me. I clung to the hope that he cared about me. Can I talk to you for a minute? My heart pounded as I contemplated what I was about to bring up with him. He looked over his shoulder. Yeah. Did he have a girl in there with him? Jealousy flared up in my chest and I hated myself for it. I'm sorry, I said, baiting back the anger threatening to seep out into my voice. My next words ended up coming out tense and strained despite my efforts to hide my emotions. Is it a bad time? No. It's fine. What's up? He kept his voice calm, but stayed glued to the doorway, which only amped up the tension in my chest. Zoe told me the show's been cancelled, I blurted. And Zoe would be right about that. Why did he have to sound so calm about it, like it was no big deal? Anger flared in my chest. Why didn't you tell me? I said with accusation in my voice. Carson sighed. Aleyna, it's complicated. I was planning on telling you tonight. When are you going to California? I asked, fighting to keep my voice from breaking. I'm leaving this weekend. Friday's our last day of filming. He didn't care, did he? My life and my struggles didn't matter to him at all. And why should they? Compared to him, I was a nobody. So, no one was going to bother telling me that I wasn't going to have a job until 2 days before my last day. I knew it wasn't his fault that no one from the set had informed me of the show cancellation, but I needed someone to take it out on. Carson bit his lip. I'm sorry, Aleyna. It's been crazy lately. And clearly, I was not his top priority. I could have been finding work elsewhere all this time. Why didn't you tell me? I figured one of the PAs talked to you about it. They should have told you a couple of weeks ago. Do you want me to talk to them for you? My heart ached inside my chest. Why was he trying to be nice to me now after ignoring me for the past 2 weeks? I couldn't take his games of pulling me in and then pushing me away anymore. It's not like it'll make a difference now, I said. What are they supposed to do? It's too late. Let me see if I can pull some strings to get you a job lined up, okay? I almost considered his offer for half a second and my heart warmed, but then I remembered how much it hurt when he'd ignored me. I couldn't let my guard down around him again. No. Do you think I want your pity? I can take care of myself. I spun around and left, fighting back the stinging tears that threatened to spill down my cheeks. Chapter 9. On my early Thursday morning run, I pushed myself harder than I ever had before. Oscar propelled forward, happy to gain the speed. I turned the corner and immediately regretted taking the route I'd chosen that morning. Carson's house came into view, and a sign with the words for rent stood there. His car stood parked in the driveway. I averted my eyes and kept running, but my heart ached. I missed him so much. How would I ever find another guy as amazing as Carson? The entire thing seemed distant and surreal, like it was a fleeting dream I'd had one night. I'd failed. Later that day, while sitting around in the stand-in tent, I spent my time on my phone searching for more stand-in roles, but it was harder than I'd realized to find stand-in work for a redhead. I'd contemplated dyeing my hair darker to make myself more marketable, but decided against it. By the end of the day, I finally admitted to myself that my only other option for work was to go back to the extras casting companies. After work, I went home and checked my email. It was full of spam and a few extras casting emails, looking for Hispanic men. I shut my laptop. That night, I ate Chinese food that claimed to be gluten-free and ended up spending the entire night in the bathroom. Friday morning, I drugged myself to set for our last day of filming. I saw Carson a few times, but I avoided him. At the end of the day, I heard everyone talking about going to a wrap party after work. Aleyna, are you coming to the wrap party? Xavier asked. I hadn't heard anything about it, I said. It's tonight at the director's home. I can shoot you an invite on Facebook. I debated going and then finally decided it was better to go than to sit at home feeling sorry for myself all night. I arrived at the address I found on the Facebook invite. I wasn't sure what I had expected, but the director's house looked surprisingly normal. It was a 2-story home in an upper-middle-class suburban neighborhood. I parked on the street and walked past the cars lined up on the curb. After tonight, I would probably never see Carson again. I walked through the party, smiling, trying my best to seem happy. Then I saw him, standing by a bookshelf, talking to Cheyenne. He must have felt my eyes on him because he glanced over and stopped mid-sentence. He looked back to Cheyenne and then walked across the room toward me. "Hey there," he said. "You didn't say it," I said. "Huh? You never call me Sweet Pea anymore." Why did I have to say that? My cheeks burned, and I looked away. Oh. Carson twisted the cup in his hand idly. "So, you're leaving, huh?" I said. "Yep. I'm all packed up." "Are you flying or driving?" "Flying. I'm having my car delivered." "Right. Because when you were a big-time celebrity, you could do stuff like have your car shipped across the country by someone else." I twirled a strand of red hair around my finger and let out a puff of air. I knew it was stupid, but a desperate part of me wanted him to beg me to come to California with him. But that was never going to happen, and I was a fool for even thinking it. But if he asked me, I would drop everything in Georgia and follow him. "Aleyna," he said, and then paused like the words were hard for him to get out. "I'm going to miss hanging out with you. We had fun, didn't we?" I said. He gave a wistful smile. "If you ever find yourself in California, do me a favor and look me up, will you?" I forced a smile. "I can try to do that." One side of his mouth pulled up. "Thanks." And that was it. Someone else came along, and Carson was pulled away to the crowd of people waiting to talk to him. Chapter 10. After Carson left, I began jogging every day, further distances than I usually did. One morning, about a week after the show had wrapped, I noticed a sign in the window of Cauliflower Cafe, a restaurant I'd been to a few times that specialized in health food and gluten-free dishes. They were looking for a cook. I ran home and returned to the restaurant, dressed in business casual. I approached one of the employees, a skinny guy with perfectly styled, jet black hair, who looked like he was about my age. His name tag said Eric. "Hi there. I'd like to speak to the manager about the job opening you have posted in the window." "Absolutely," Eric said in a bright tone with a wave of his hand. "We're looking for another cook. Let me grab Steve. He's the owner." Eric walked through a set of rustic, modern doors, and I looked around the restaurant. It was painted bright teal and red with metal tables and chairs. Rough wooden beams ran across the ceiling, and one wall was covered in rustic wood. A portly man with a large cleft in his chin emerged from the back. "Hey there," he said with a professional, but friendly smile. He reached out and shook my hand. "I'm Steve. I heard you are interested in the position we have open in the kitchen." Steve must have liked me because he hired me on the spot. I began work the very next day, chopping vegetables, sautéing, and learning new recipes every day. Steve was a kind-hearted, generous boss, and Eric and I became fast friends. Zoe had hopes that something might develop with my new friend at work, but I quickly squashed that hope when I assured her that he wasn't into girls. I liked my new job more than I could admit, and I realized that maybe I'd found my calling in the restaurant industry. I stopped submitting for auditions, and with my new, busy work schedule, I had no chance to submit for background work. But I was okay with that. Summer passed, and Zoe continued at Emory for the fall. Wyatt was now living in an apartment with a bunch of his law school buddies. He still came over from time to time, but he never talked about Carson. But, to be fair, I never asked either. It was just easier to pretend he never existed, that I had never given my heart to him. One night after work, I got a notification on one of my YouTube videos. It was a sweet comment from a viewer who had enjoyed my series and wanted to know when I was going to put out another video. "What's up?" Zoe said. I looked up to see her leaning against my doorframe. "Oh," I said. I was just rewatching my old videos. Why don't you make new ones anymore? You haven't put one out since spring. I shrugged. I don't know. I'm just busy. You're depressed, Aleyna. What happened to you? You have no life. You just go to work and come home. You don't date. I don't know. I just don't feel like going out. This is about Carson, isn't it? You're still stuck on him, huh? I sighed in response. That's it. We're going out for ice cream. The real kind this time. None of the healthy stuff. 30 minutes later, we were sitting on the couch, each of us holding a carton of Ben and Jerry's. Aleyna. I know what you need to do. What? You need to revamp your YouTube. Revamp how? I don't know. Maybe put a new spin on your series. I feel like the smoothie thing is overdone. I chewed on the inside of my cheek. I'll think about it. She jabbed her spoon at me. Good. And let me know what you end up doing. I hate seeing you like this. The next day at work, I thought about what Zoe said as I chopped carrots and onions for the soup I was making. I'd just gotten a promotion, and my financial situation had finally turned a corner. Maybe Zoe was right and smoothies weren't the right direction to take, after all. I went home that night and pulled out a notebook and started jotting down various ideas for recipes. Some were variations on recipes I'd learned at work, but some were creations I'd been tweaking for years. That was where I shone as a cook anyway. Wednesday was my day off. I spent the entire day in the kitchen, trying out recipes. Thursday night, I came home again from a full day of cooking and continued in my own kitchen with my own creations. On Friday night, Zoe and Wyatt came in the front door, interrupting my brainstorming session about how to tweak my gluten-free clam chowder to get it just right. You're cooking again. This is the third night in a row you've been cooking some huge meal until 1 or 2 a.m. What is going on with you? I'm revamping my YouTube channel, just like you suggested. I decided I need to go in a different direction. I'm going to focus on recipes that are gluten-free. You know, I've come up with recipes for years to help me adapt to this diet. Well, I decided that I would change my series to focus on that more. Zoe's eyes lit up. Aleyna, this is the first brilliant idea you've had in a long time. I know. And I feel like this series could help people like me who suffer from celiac. Let me know if you need any help with the filming, Wyatt said. I have access to a camera and tripod that Carson left behind. My heart did a little flip-flop in my chest at the mention of Carson. He would be inadvertently helping me, after all. I spent the next 2 weeks perfecting my recipes, buying ingredients, failing, and trying again. When Zoe and I were walking down the bulk foods section of Whole Foods, she said to me, I think you should just make a video. It feels like you're stalling. You're ready, Aleyna. Just go for it. I lifted the lid of a bin of raw walnuts and scooped some into the plastic bags provided. She was right. I'd been putting off filming. I think I know why I'm stalling. I'm just afraid, I said, writing the bin number onto the twist tie before wrapping it around the bag. Why are you afraid? You're going to be great. I tossed the bag of walnuts into my cart. What if it's dumb? What if I look stiff or weird on the camera? What if I get nervous and I end up botching the recipes? You just need to be yourself. Pretend that you're just hanging out with us, goofing off. I took Zoe's suggestion to heart, and Wyatt came over the following night to begin our first video. The first few takes felt stiff, but then I imagined I was hanging out with friends, people who loved me. As I became more comfortable with the camera focused on me, I imagined I was talking directly to the people who needed to learn about these recipes, and how it could change their lives and help them eat more normally. I used tips and ideas that I'd learned from my time in the restaurant. Christmas came and went, and over the next several months, I released a new recipe a week. I focused on special treats for the holidays and dishes that used the produce that was in season. I continued working at the restaurant, and ideas would come to me for new videos. I'd go home at night and try out the new recipe ideas. On my days off, Wyatt came over and helped me film. As time progressed, I became more comfortable in front of the camera. "I was thinking about your channel the other day," Zoe said, coming into the kitchen early one morning in February as I was frying up some eggs. "You need a website." I hadn't even thought about that. "Wyatt's dad can totally do it," Zoe said. "He has a web design company. He might be able to do it for you with a friends and family rate. I can get his number from Wyatt." I called Mr. Peters an hour later and set up an appointment to get started with my web page. By mid-April, I had a professional site up and running with a logo. I updated my new logo on my social media pages and spent more time connecting with people on Twitter and Facebook. One night in May, I was sitting on my bed with my laptop, checking my Twitter, when I saw that I had a retweet from Carson. My breath caught, and I put a hand to my mouth. Carson. He was still out there, and he still cared. Zoe ran into my room, waving her phone. "Carson just retweeted you." "Yeah. I know." I cocked my head to the side. "Were you in there stalking my Twitter?" She gave me a sheepish smile and buried a hand in her springy, black curls. "Maybe." "Weirdo." I gave her a sarcastic look, but my heart warmed to see that she was so invested in my success. "Do you know what this means for your publicity? He has 5 million followers. Think of how many people will see your channel just from one retweet." I liked to tell myself that I was beyond caring about what Carson thought these days. It had been nearly a year since I'd had any interaction with him. Why would he still be on my mind after all this time? But he was. In fact, I thought about him and our time together nearly every day. I missed him more than I wanted to admit to myself. I knew it was why I wasn't dating. Zoe kept telling me to put dating apps on my phone, but I just wasn't interested. I pulled up my laptop the next night, and I had an email from a sender I didn't recognize. My eyes widened as I scanned the contents of the email. She had seen my video on Twitter and wanted to know if I'd be interested in auditioning for her in California the upcoming week for a cooking show that had just signed a contract with Netflix. Carson. It was because of him that I got this email. My heart pounded in my chest. I shifted my weight on the bed. I couldn't just drop everything in Georgia to go to an audition in California. I was scheduled to work every day the following week. I shut my laptop and went into the bathroom to brush my teeth. 2 days later, while I was driving home from work, I passed a billboard of Carson's face with the name of his new show, Full Disclosure. It was the hottest new show on CBS. The ratings were through the roof. I knew from personal experience that the show was amazing. I'd seen every episode. Carson starred as a detective who tracked his missing wife by talking to ghosts. The writing was excellent, the stakes were high, but it was Carson that really made the show. He was passionate and witty, but mostly he was just Carson. There was a reason I'd fallen in love with him. Apparently, all of America had as well. Carson had made it. A strange feeling shot through my belly. Had I given up on my dream too soon? When I got home, I slid out a small chest from under my bed and lifted the lid. I pulled out a program I had made for a play I'd written, directed, and acted as the lead in when I was 10. It was my first play, a romantic comedy. I smiled as I opened the program and scanned the juvenile scrawl of my 10-year-old self. I set the program on the pink shag rug next to my bed. The next item in the box was a program from a musical I'd been cast in when I was in high school. I rifled through the box, reliving the memories. These were my hopes and dreams, and for the past several months, I'd given up on them. Since taking my job at Cauliflower Cafe, I hadn't been to a single audition. I'd been working toward an acting career my entire life. What had happened? So I'd had a few bad auditions. It was part of the process. I could have done more. Taken an improv class. Something. I'd thought that I'd found happiness with my new life path, but seeing Carson on that billboard was like a shock to my system. I could still have the dream Carson had achieved. If Carson could do it, so could I, right? Although cooking made me happy, did that mean I had to give up my dreams of acting? Then I remembered the email. Should I respond to the woman about the cooking show? Fly all the way to California? Would I be able to get someone to cover my shifts? It would be such a pain, and if I didn't get them covered, I would probably get fired. I let out a pent-up breath. I had no other choice. I had to do it, or I would never find out if I could follow this dream. I pulled up the email on my phone and found where she had left her number. I tapped it and sent the call through. Hi. It's Aleyna McKenzie. I'm calling about the email you sent me about an audition opportunity next week. Aleyna. Hi. I'm Meredith Anderson. It's great to hear from you. The audition is on Wednesday. Can you tell me more about the project? I asked. Absolutely. The audition is for a cooking show called Healthy Eating Habits. We specialize in health food, vegan, gluten-free, and raw foods. I was very impressed with your YouTube channel and your warm personality. Your enthusiasm for helping others to find healthy options is contagious. I'd just love to get you into the studio and in front of our team for an audition. Thank you so much for this opportunity. How can I get started? I said, pushing the growing excitement in my belly down. I hadn't gotten the part yet. The competition for the role was probably insane. I will send you an email with the exact location and time of the audition and the instructions for the auditions itself. Sound good? Sounds great. Thank you. I look forward to meeting you, Aleyna. Good luck. I dropped my phone on my bedspread and squealed. What is it? Zoe yelled from her bedroom. I just got an audition in California. What? Zoe appeared in my doorway. Am I hallucinating, or did you just say you have an audition in California? I have an audition in California next week. I need to book a flight, I said, my voice escalating with every word. I can't even believe this. What's it for? It's for a cooking show, I said. They just signed a contract with Netflix. It was starting to sink in. This was my first real opportunity. And it was because of Carson. If he hadn't sent out that retweet, none of this would be happening. Even after all these months, he was helping me achieve my dreams, and I loved him all the more for it. Zoe dropped me off at the Atlanta airport at 5 on Tuesday morning. I was able to get another cook to pick up the entire week of shifts for me, so I'd even have an extra day to do a little bit of sightseeing. I picked up my boarding passes and got in line for security. The last words Carson said to me stuck in my mind. If you're ever in Cali, look me up. Would I have the courage to text him to let him know I was flying out? Fear lodged itself into my gut. What if he didn't even care? I would be putting myself out there, and I'd only end up getting hurt. And why would Carson take me seriously? He could have any girl he wanted. I shook my head. No. I wouldn't be calling him. Chapter 11. I made it to my audition 30 minutes early. I paid the taxi driver and then stepped out onto the pavement. I checked my phone to verify the address of the skyscraper that stood before me and then took a deep breath. This was it. I walked through the revolving doors and into a posh lobby, decorated with chic furniture and an artsy chandelier overhead. My heels clicked across the marble floor as I approached the elevators. "Excuse me, miss." I craned my neck to see a security guard waving me over to their desk. "Who are you here to see?" "Oh, I fumbled for my phone and checked the email I still had pulled up. "Meredith Anderson with Anderson Wick Casting. She's on floor 22. "You're here for the audition?" he asked. "Yes." "Your name?" "Aleyna McKenzie." "One moment, please." He picked up the phone and pressed a couple of buttons. "Yes, I have Aleyna McKenzie here for an audition." He hung up the phone and printed off a ticket with a barcode on it, similar to a boarding pass. "This will allow you to use the elevator," he said, handing it to me. "Thank you." I took the paper from him and crossed the massive lobby to the golden doors of the elevators. I scanned my ticket, and the doors opened. I rode to the 22nd floor and stepped off the elevator. A wall of glass with double doors and sleek chrome handles stood before me. Through the clear barrier, I could see a white reception desk and Anderson Wick Casting Agency above in silver lettering. I opened the door and the receptionist greeted me warmly. "Hi, Aleyna." "Yes, that's me." "Perfect." She picked up her phone. "Amelia. Aleyna's here for her audition." A tanned woman in her late 40s came around the corner. "Aleyna." "Yes. I'm Amelia Stain. It's great to meet you." She led me to a door, and just before she opened it, she asked, "Do you have a resume and headshot?" "Yes," I said. I opened the red leather bag I'd brought with me and pulled out a black folder. I removed my resume with my headshot stapled to the back of it and handed it to Amelia. "Wonderful." She opened the door and I followed her inside. The room was set up with chairs on one end and a large kitchen on the other. A camera was set up in the corner of the room. Amelia handed my resume to a woman I assumed was the casting director and took a seat next to her behind the long table the three women were seated behind. "Hi, I'm Aleyna McKenzie." Amelia smiled warmly. "Aleyna, today we would like you to make guacamole for us. We have provided the recipe and all the ingredients and tools you will need. I want you to pretend this is your great-grandmother's recipe. You have 1 minute to read over the recipe and get your hands washed, and 5 minutes in front of the camera to prepare the recipe." I ground my palms against each other, and they were slick with sweat. I stood in front of the camera and took a deep breath. I clicked across the tile floor and washed my hands. I dried them off and then glanced at the recipe card on the countertop, scanning the ingredients and spotting them on the counter, surrounding a bright red ceramic bowl. "You may begin whenever you are ready," Amelia said. I imagined that the women before me were my oldest and closest friends. A smile spread across my face. "Hi, I'm Aleyna McKenzie. Welcome to Healthy Eating Habits. Today I will be showing you how to make a delicious version of guacamole that has been passed down in my family for generations." Chatting easily about each step as I prepared the dish, I sliced open the avocado and removed the pit before scooping it into the bowl provided. I smashed the avocado with a fork and then squeezed lime juice over it. I finely chopped a red onion and a Roma tomato and scraped the vegetables from the cutting board into the bowl, mixing the ingredients until they were smooth. By the time I'd finished the dish and was tasting it with a chip I'd found in a nearby bowl of tortilla chips, I'd practically forgotten the women were there to judge my performance. I'd truly gotten lost in the moment as I'd prepared the recipe. Wonderful, Aleyna. Excellent job, Amelia smiled. We will be issuing callbacks later this week. Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity, I said, returning Amelia's warm smile. I walked down the street in Hollywood, shamelessly gaping at the sights like the obvious tourist that I was. I pushed through the crowd down the Hollywood Walk of Fame, past the stars embedded in the sidewalk, and made my way to Sunset where the old-school Hollywood studio still stood. I checked the map I'd pulled up on my phone to figure out where I wanted to go next when my phone rang in my hand. Miss McKenzie, the voice over the phone said. Yes, this is she, I answered. Miss McKenzie, this is Amelia Stain. We loved your audition for Healthy Eating Habits yesterday. It was a pleasure to meet you. Oh, thank you. I said. It was great to meet you, too. Are you available to come back in for a callback tomorrow afternoon? Absolutely, I said, grateful I'd taken a couple of extra days off to do some sightseeing. I spent the rest of the day picking up souvenirs. Who knew when I'd ever be back to California? That night I headed to my hotel and collapsed on the bed exhausted. I fell into a deep sleep. I awoke the next morning feeling refreshed and ready to conquer the day. I rifled through my suitcase to find the perfect outfit. I came up with a simple, yet classy, white button-down shirt, black slacks, and accentuated the outfit with a teal necklace that brought out my blue eyes. When I returned to the agency that afternoon at 1, I had no idea what they would want me to do. Amelia ushered me into the room with the kitchen, and I introduced myself once more. This time the woman, who I'd recognized as Meredith Anderson from their website, spoke. Aleyna, we'd like you to come up with a recipe of your own. You have access to all the ingredients available in our kitchen. We will give you 1 minute to prepare before the camera turns on, and then 20 minutes in front of the camera to prepare your dish. 1 minute. How was I supposed to come up with a recipe out of thin air that fast? I opened the fridge and began pulling out ingredients. I had no idea what direction I wanted to take, so I gathered food I enjoyed eating. The first thing that jumped out to me was kale. I grabbed it, along with parsley, fresh garlic, chives, and parmesan. I stacked a container of pre-cooked risotto on top of my already full arms. I spread my ingredients on the countertop and stared at them. I walked to the pantry and glanced around at my choices. I took out a bag of walnuts and a glass bottle of olive oil. I went back to the fridge and glanced around one more time. I swiped a stick of butter for good measure. I looked at the food in front of me, all my favorite flavors. But how could I pull them together into something that would make sense? I stared at the walnut and the garlic together and it hit me. Pesto. I'd just done a video on making pesto a couple of months ago. I spun around to see if there was a food processor available and spotted one sitting next to the stove. Perfect. I just have to sauté the kale and butter, pile it on the risotto, and top it all off with the pesto. I turned to the camera and smiled. Miss McKenzie. Yes, I said into my phone, setting down my carry-on bag as I took a seat just outside the air terminal. Amelia Stain. How are you? I'm doing well. Thank you. Great. I'm calling to let you know that we would like to offer you a position on our new series Healthy Eating Habits. I pulled my phone away from my ear and stared at it. This wasn't a joke, was it? Hello? Miss McKenzie. Are you there? Yes. I'm here. I'm sorry. You just took me by surprise. That's okay. I completely understand. Do you accept the offer, or do you need some time to think about your decision? No, I accept the offer. My heart pounded so hard I was afraid she would hear it over the phone. Perfect. We will be contacting you with more information via email. In the meantime, we'd like to meet with you early next week to solidify plans for the show. Great. That's great, I said, glancing around the terminal. I'd need to book another flight out. Just after I boarded my plane to fly back to Atlanta, my head began to spin with all the preparations I'd need to make to start a new life in California. I would need to find an apartment near the studio. But California was expensive. How would I possibly be able to afford it? I settled into my seat and shot Amelia an email just before the captain began to taxi down the runway. Hello, Amelia. Could you possibly let me know what the salary for this position will be? Thank you. Aleyna. I put my phone on airplane mode and tucked it into the bag I had shoved under the seat in front of me. I settled under the blanket and fluffed the pillow a flight attendant had brought me and closed my eyes. When I felt the plane touch down on the ground in Atlanta, my eyes flew open. I yawned and stretched, causing the blanket to slide off of me. As we taxied to our gate, I took my phone off airplane mode and waited as the notifications popped up. I slid my phone back into my pocket as the plane began to empty. I grabbed my carry-on bag from the overhead compartment and followed the crowd as we exited the plane. I walked through the busy Atlanta airport, taking in the familiar sights and sounds and the distinct cultural vibe that Atlanta always seemed to have. I'd really grown to love this place. I wove through the crowd and made a beeline for the nearest restroom. After washing my hands, I texted Zoe to let her know I was ready to be picked up. Then I checked my email. There was another message from Amelia. Aleyna. Excellent question. We plan to start you at just over $10,000 a month. I hope that will be acceptable to you. Best wishes. Amelia. I almost dropped my phone when I read her email. Yeah, I sputtered. The woman walking next to me as we exited the restroom gave me a funny look, and I reddened. I sunk into a seat just outside the bathroom and composed another email reply to Amelia. Amelia. Yes. That salary is acceptable. Thank you. Aleyna. Chapter 12. Beams of sunlight filtered through the fronds of the palm trees that stood outside my favorite juice bar in Hollywood. I crossed my legs and smoothed the full skirt of the bright yellow sundress I wore. I sipped a smoothie, a spicy kale blend with apples and lemon. It was the perfect pick-me-up for a full day of work at the studio. A motorcycle pulled up, and the driver stepped off, pulling off his helmet. He froze mid-stride as his eyes fell on me. Carson. One side of his mouth pulled up. Well, hello there, sweet pea. My breath caught in my throat. Hello. Fancied meeting you here. I leaned back in my chair casually, hoping he couldn't hear how hard my heart was beating. Imagine that. I bobbed my crisscrossed, high-heeled leg. Mind if I join you? He asked. I was hoping you'd ask, I said, standing. Are you going inside to order something? That was the plan I had in mind, actually. He opened the door for me, and I stepped past him. By the way, he said, cocking his head to the side. You look amazing. Thank you, I said. How long have you been in town? He asked. About a year. I filmed a cooking show, and now I'm filming a romantic comedy for Paramount. Look at you, sweet pea. You're living the dream. He got his smoothie, and we went back outside to the table where I'd been enjoying the California sunshine. He reached out and put a hand over mine. I have to get going, but I want to see you again. My heart flip-flopped in my chest. Are you busy tonight? He asked. I told him I wasn't. He pulled out his phone. Is your number still the same? Yes. Perfect. I know a great Mexican place not too far from here. I had trouble focusing on set that day. The director commented on my distracted mind more than once during our time filming. But how could I help it? My mind was reeling from the fact that Carson was back in my life again. A persistent hope sprung up in my chest that I constantly tried to squash. He just wants dinner. Nothing more, Aleyna. On my way back from the studio, I dialed Zoe. You're never going to believe who I bumped into today. Carson. How'd you know? He told Wyatt. Carson talked to Wyatt about seeing me today. My heart rate sped up. That had to mean something, right? What are you wearing tonight? You have to look perfect. I have no idea, I admitted. Do you still have that green dress? The one that makes your eyes pop? Yeah. I have it, I said, pulling into the parking garage of the complex where I lived. Wear that one. I laughed. Okay. Listen, Aleyna. I need to tell you something. What is it? Remember when your parents helped you pay to get your car fixed? Yeah. They didn't pay for that. What do you mean? I asked, climbing out of my car. Carson paid for it. I froze. That couldn't be true, could it? Would Carson really do something like that for me? No. It couldn't be right. It didn't add up. What are you talking about? I shut my car door. I sent my parents a thank you card a long time ago for that. If they hadn't paid for it, they would have called me to clear up the issue. Carson called them and asked them to stay quiet about it. I gasped. What? Why would he do that? You'll have to ask him about that. I narrowed my eyes in confusion. How do you know all this? Wyatt told me. I was sworn to secrecy. But since you and Carson are maybe rekindling things, I thought you should know. I walked into my house, my head reeling with this new information. Carson picked me up right at 6. I wore the green dress Zoe had recommended with a pair of tan high heels. He opened the door to his BMW, and I climbed in, tucking my skirt under my thigh as he shut the door and circled to the driver's side. How was filming today? He asked. It was great, I said. So? He started the engine. You didn't tell me you were the leading lady of this film. I studied him, and a slow smile spread across my face. Did you go look me up on IMDb? As a matter of fact, I did, he said without apology, putting the car into drive. He pulled up to a stop sign and looked at me, his eyes crinkled in the corners. I knew you'd get there. It was you, I said. He cocked his head to the side with a question in his eyes before turning left out of my complex. I'm where I am today because you believed in me when I didn't believe I could do it. And then, that retweet. It was simple, but if you hadn't done it, I would have never landed the cooking show. I had no idea, at the time, how popular that show was going to become. I know. He kept his eyes on the road. I watched the entire series. I gaped at him. You knew. Of course, I did. I followed your journey from the very start. My heart swelled. He still cared. But here's the thing, sweet pea. Carson's voice was soft, but firm. I didn't do much. You did it on your own. You were the one who went to the auditions and worked hard. I thought about his words. Maybe he was right. I'd given him so much credit for the help he'd given me, but I'd completely overlooked the hard work I'd put in to make those dreams come to fruition. It's great if someone believes in you. Everyone needs to have support from people who care about them, but ultimately, if we don't work hard and do our part, those dreams are nothing but wishes, fantasy. Carson pulled into the parking lot of the restaurant and took my hand, threading his fingers with mine as we walked to the building. "Carson," I said when we'd settled into our booth. "I'm confused about something. I'm wondering if you could clear it up for me." "What's confusing you?" he asked, dipping a chip into the fresh salsa the waiter had just placed on our table. "Why did you pay for my car, to get fixed, keep it a secret, and then stop talking to me? It doesn't make sense at all. I paid to get your car fixed because I couldn't stand to see you in pain. You were trying to spare me pain. That makes no sense." A lump formed in my throat. "You caused me pain, Carson." I choked back, the tears threatening to spill down my cheeks. "You stopped talking to me for over a year. Do you know how much that hurt me?" Carson looked at me, his eyes full of sorrow. "I know I hurt you, Aleyna. I'm sorry." I wiped a renegade tear away with my napkin. "Why did you do it?" Carson took a deep breath and then spoke. "I stopped talking to you because I knew if I didn't, I wouldn't be able to stay away from you." "Why would you want to stay away from me? What did I ever do to you?" I whispered. "I did it to protect you." I sat back in my chair, stunned. "Protect me? From what?" "From me. I wasn't good for you. I hurt people. I didn't want to hurt you, too. I cared about you too much to let that happen." Anger boiled inside me. "So, you thought it was okay to just make that decision for me without saying anything to me? You tried to protect me, but all you ended up doing was hurting me anyway." He stared back at me, brow furrowed, and frowned. The waiter brought our food, and we ate in silence for several moments. For the rest of the date, we avoided any talk of our relationship. Carson took me home and walked me to the door as an awkward stillness hung between us. I unlocked my door and turned back to face him. Would I ever see Carson Peters again? "Good night," I said. "Good night." A team of hair and makeup people crowded around me, touching up my lipstick, powdering my cheeks, and perfecting my curls as I ran through my lines in my head one last time. "Rolling," the director called. The hair and makeup artists scattered, and I turned to my co-star, Aaron. We filmed the scene 3 times before the director was satisfied. And that's a wrap for the day. See you folks in the morning. "What's he doing here? He's not in this film, is he?" Aaron asked. I followed Aaron's gaze across the room. "Carson." "Excuse me," I said, brushing past Aaron. "Carson," I said when I'd caught up to him. "How'd you find me here?" He grinned broadly and shrugged. "I'm friends with the director. I just shot him a text and asked if it would be okay if I stopped by." "Why?" I asked. "I had to see you. And you couldn't wait until I was off work." His smile widened. "Nope." "Why not?" He stepped close to me, his blue eyes intense. "I let you go, sweet pea, and that was a mistake, one I don't want to make again." "What are you saying?" I asked. "If you're willing to put up with me, I'm willing to trust you enough to make your own decision about whether you want to be with me." "I'm sorry I took that choice from you. I thought I was protecting you, but I let my fear take control, and that wasn't okay. Would you be willing to start over with me? I can't promise you that I will be perfect, but I can promise to try my best to treat you right." I stared back at him. I couldn't believe what he was asking me. "Are you serious?" Would I joke about something like this? He asked, a faint smile on his lips. I shook my head, all the while staring at him. So what do you say? I took his hands in mine. Yes. 1,000,000 times, yes. Carson closed the space between us and brushed my hair back from my face, kissing me gently at first, until the kiss grew deeper and more passionate. Carson and I had shared many kisses throughout our time together, but this one felt like a promise. I didn't know what the future brought with Carson, but I knew I wanted to find out. This has been Dating the Actor by Cindy Ray Hale. Copyright 2017. Produced by Cindy Ray Hale. Productions copyright 2022.
Hey guys, this is Cindy Ray Hale. Thank you so much for watching Dating the Actor, and I hope you really enjoyed this book. I wrote this book back in 2017 after doing some acting work myself. I've been on multiple film sets, probably 20 or more film sets. I used to do extras work in both Atlanta, Georgia, and in Salt Lake City, Utah. And I actually became eligible for the Screen Actors Guild when a director picked me out and stuck me in front of the camera and told me to talk. It was for an HBO production called Mosaic. So that was kind of an exciting thing that pretty much every extra wants to have happen. And so I decided to write this book based on my experiences on a film set, and it was a lot of fun to write. I was actually living in Decatur, Georgia at one time when I was doing a lot of film work, and I was on some different productions like The Vampire Diaries, and I got to see Ian Somerhalder. I was on the originals. I was a soccer player in The Fifth Wave. My hair's up in a bun on top of my head, so if you watch this scene, the soccer field scene in The Fifth Wave, you can see me in there. I was in Ant-Man. You can see me as one of the moms at the birthday party standing up next to a window. My hair was kind of reddish in that scene. And I got to see Paul Rudd and also Judy Greer and everybody who was at that birthday party scene. I was in a couple other scenes in that movie too. The scene where they're in a restaurant with like blue lights and stuff. I was there. And there were a bunch of other movies that I was in. I can't even remember all of them. Some of Tyler Perry stuff too. But I had a lot of fun doing all that film work, and I'm really passionate about it. And I don't know if I'll ever do it again. Maybe my books will get turned into movies. I also studied musical theater at Weber State University, so I did a little bit of acting there, and I wanted to get into directing, but then life led me in another direction, as it tends to do sometimes. So, but anyway, I just wanted to kind of memorialize all of that acting stuff that I did into this book, and there were definitely people that were hitting on girls on the set, and like all of that stuff was real. And actually another cool part of the book where Carson calls her Sweet Pea was kind of based off of Ian Somerhalder. I saw him talk to the wardrobe lady and he called her Sweet Pea, and I'd never really heard anybody say that, and I thought it was really catchy, so I put it in the book, which is kind of a fun little behind the scenes tidbit of information. So I love stuff like that, and I always want to, share those little details with you guys. I hope you guys really enjoyed this video. I plan on uploading more, so if you hit the like button and subscribe, and make sure you hit the little bell for the notifications so that you get notified when I upload the next book. And I have some really exciting things coming for you guys. I know right now this book is the narrator that I used, the robot narrator. I used a program called MicMonster for that, and the reason that I did that is because narrators are very expensive, and I am just getting my channel monetized, and I'm hoping to get, once I get monetized, I'm hoping to take all of these videos and turn them into like the regular kind with the narrator. So, but it's going to take me a little bit of time and building up my channel to get there. So the more you guys can subscribe and watch, the more I'm going to be able to bring you guys better quality content, because I know these robot videos aren't necessarily ideal, but they're a way that you can get the book for free. And also, you can grab these books on Amazon at any time. They are for sale. And so if you prefer to listen that way, that's what I tell. Sometimes I get some comments where people are complaining about the narration. So that's why I'm doing it that way. And it is a temporary thing, but I hope that you guys will like and subscribe and stick around, because I have great things in store. Thanks so much. Bye.